All right, everybody. Hello. Welcome to this rather unusual stream that I just threw up here in the last few minutes. So basically, the reason why I am here is because we've been talking about Forbidden Lands, and I am getting ready to launch a new Forbidden Lands campaign. And as part of this, process, if you will, there are things that I want to change about the game, and I want to change about the system. Not because I think there's anything wrong with the system, but just because I think that I've been doing this a long time, and Forbidden Lands is not a new system. It is a game system that I have had and owned for many years. So I've been familiar with it for a long time, and it does a lot of things that I really like a lot. But, and I am the first person. Let me be very clear about something here. A couple of things. Number one, I don't think what I would call anything that we do here. It's not game design, okay? Because I'm not trying to design a game. I am trying to make specific surgical changes to fit my playstyle, my GM playstyle, and my players' playstyle in the context of this specific game. So, if you want to call that game design, I mean, that's fine. But I generally speaking, I don't think it's what I would call game design. But hey, we started off with a super chat. Again, I didn't even update the super chat goals because I don't. This is just for fun. Surprise stream gets surprise green. Well, thank you, Mr. Lund. I appreciate the support, and thank you for that, and that means a lot. But again, we're just here to kind of hang out. I was just going to do this work anyways. We've been talking about it, so I figured we could just kind of talk about it a little bit. But hey, what's up to everybody here? Also, too, whatever. It's Wednesday night. We don't even normally stream, so this is like a complete freebie. Roll for Combat isn't stream. Well. Anything going on today? Well, while everyone else is talking about Hasbro and WotC and Tencent and Larian Studios and new OGLs, I'm just getting ready to make some tweaks to Forbidden Lands, a free league game, in order to run a game. So anyways, Pumpkin, do I sound different, or is it me? I don't know. Does anybody else think I sound very different? The only thing I could think of is, normally I have my microphone mounted low, and then I have it pointed up, right? But I've got my whiteboard screen here, so I have it high, and I'm pointing it down. So maybe that's the only thing I could think of. Okay, well, it sounds the same to KC, and I am inclined to believe him too over Pumpkin. If Ben was here, it would be fine. Yes, my secret twin brother. Of course. Twirl the mustache. Let's see. You sound a little post-sore throat recovery to me. I don't know. It's later in the day. I don't think I have a cold or anything like that. I think it might just be the position of the mic. It really might be. I don't think I've changed anything on it. Levels seem good. Anyways. So Peter, this is a constant topic on our Patreon Discord, is what is game design and what qualifies as game design. Tweaking rules seems like game design activity, although certainly not the same as designing an entire game. And yes, I think it is a spectrum. But what I'm really trying to say here is, I don't think any of the rules, so let's very clearly specify this here, okay? So I don't think. Okay, so number one, I don't think that these Forbidden Lands rules are bad or broken. And again, some of this tonight, I mean, apologies, but some of this does, kind of rely on the knowledge that you might have of this game. So I'm not going to describe everything in Forbidden Lands. But as an example, there's some things that come up all the time about how people have a problem with the pushing mechanic because they think it is prone to metagaming, I'm not really concerned about that. I could see where people might feel like it's prone to metagaming, but that is not something that I am concerned about. Because I know my players, and I'm not trying to design a game for 10 million people, or let's be more realistic. I'm not trying to design a game for, 10,000 people. I'm trying to design a game for just me, the GM. And I've played, I've been playing, D&D and role-playing games for over 30 years. And in some cases I've been playing with the same people for, a long time. So I know what games, let me rephrase it. I know what I need to handle a game. I know what's going to come up. I know the style of the game. I know my style of my players. I know that the game is going to lead to certain decisions that are going to require me to make certain calls as a GM. So I'm trying to anticipate my players' needs. So this is more about, it's really more about levers that I know. Okay. I know this to be true. That my players, okay, and myself are gonna pull. So, that's sort of the other thing. I've played these games long enough, to sort of know what the situation is. So Dan says, pushing roles for willpower being exploitable, I think, is good game design in that it is so clearly exploitable. It encourages there to be a table conversation where everyone comes to a mutual agreement to play the game as intended. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se. I just think that the style of game that I play is, it's not even that I think there's a problem with willpower. It's that I feel like willpower is sort of underutilized, right? In the design space, and I want to sort of utilize it more. Okay, so what do we got here? Okay, so a couple of things again. Forbidden Lands here. There's a couple of things that I want to deal with, and this is where things can get a little off. And this is what we're trying to workshop here. I've talked about this before, but I really like the resource dice. Black Hack would call this the utilization or the utilization or the usage die. And I like this mechanic for a lot of reasons. And again, there's going to be some cross-pollinating here. This stream is not going to make a lot of sense if you haven't watched a lot of our streams or been a part of a lot of our conversations. The reason I like the resource die is because, and Forbidden Lands is already sort of really rife with this mechanic. It is essentially a push your luck mechanic. And when we are talking about Forbidden Lands, right, we're talking about a game that is survival based. I mean, this is I think at its core, again, there's plenty of ways that you could play Forbidden Lands, but I really think that the core of the game is survival based. And, from the combat and certainly to the overland exploration, I think that is sort of an ongoing theme. And survival is at its core about pushing your luck, because these aren't people who are, survivors of a shipwreck and they have to survive, or a plane crash and they have to survive. They are purposefully going out into these unknown areas, and to find their destiny, to find treasure, to find whatever, to explore for exploration's sake. So they're willingly putting themselves into this danger. And so the whole exercise, the whole enterprise becomes something in just one big pushing your luck. How much further do you want to go? Okay. And fundamentally, this breaks down to is a series of resource waterfalls, okay, where you have long-term resources, okay? You have short-term resources, and then you have your goals, okay? And the idea here, simply put, is that you start, right, with a lot of long-term resources. And then you might convert some of that long-term resource into a short-term resource. Then you deplete that short-term resource and you make progress on your goals. Maybe that's getting treasure. Maybe that's getting experience. It depends on the game system that you're talking about. Okay. Now, there's an exchange rate. Okay. Right. If you could think about it, there's an exchange rate between these resources. That exchange rate is where the agency of the game comes in. This is where your players' skill and their ideas and what they are actually doing, that matters. It's also where their characters matter. And again, we've talked about this before, right? The third, I can never remember if it's the second or third, but one of the rules of Dungeon Craft is a good adventure, a good game, right? It should challenge the PCs and the players. So I really like resource games because this means that, so you want to challenge both their PC. That means like the mechanics of the game and the player. So there's an efficiency here. So you've gained this much goals. Great. Well, we did pretty well. We still have some long-term resources, but we're almost out of short-term resource. Okay. We'll take some more long-term resource. We'll build up some short-term resources and then we'll consume those as well. And we make even more progress on our goals. Okay. Well, now we're starting to run a little low. Do we continue? Do we press our luck? Do we continue to adventure or do we head back to safety? What are the pros? What are the cons? So I really, really love the resource dice mechanic in this game because, when you think about something like the resources in this game, we've got the food die, the water die, the arrows, and torches. This is what the default game uses for resource dice. And of course, these can be rated anywhere from D6 to D12. Okay. And that represents how much of that resource you have, relatively speaking. And every time you use that resource, you roll it. And if you roll a 1 or a 2 on that die, it decays into the next lowest die. And a D8 will decay into a D6, and a D6 decays into nothing. Okay. And then you're out. So you're never really quite sure how much you have left. You can play the odds, but you can't be really, really sure. I love this. And the reason I love this is because this is a fantastic way to give you that feeling of uncertainty. But I have a problem. All right. I have a problem. The problem I have is that these resources, and again, this is not a problem with the game. It's just a problem I have. In fact, it's a problem to me. The game didn't go far enough. Okay. My problem is I want more resources to track. And I mean this in a couple different ways. The first is these resources are all physical, okay, or diegetic. They are real things. And normally we would be tracking these on our inventory slots, but in this case, we're sort of metaphorically tracking them, abstractly tracking them with these dice, which is great because it introduces uncertainty. And I've talked about this before about how I feel like the uncertainty of how long your resource is going to last is actually kind of more realistic than saying, I know I have exactly 8.5 days of food left in my pack. It doesn't work that way. You don't know that you have exactly 8.5 days worth of food, right? That could be 6 days. It could be 10 days. It all depends on how hungry you get, or did mice get into your pack and eat some of your food, right? Like there's a million things that can happen. You can never be completely sure. And I like that about this a lot. But as physical resource systems, yes, right. This is long before, shelf-stable preservatives. Things could spoil. So my problem is I really like this, but it's physical. It's diegetic. I want to be able. Okay, so now this is like a side tangent. People have asked me like before, what are some of my favorite? What's my favorite PBTA tech? And I say all the time that it's conditions. Okay, and we mentioned this on the stream last night. I love to be able to assess a player, on their PC, I should say, a penalty for their action. Maybe it's, this is all time back to PBTA, honestly, is what it's all time back. And because it just works. So, in Powered by the Apocalypse, a game like Avatar, okay, your character might try to do something, right? Like they try to knock down a door. Okay. And when you do that, your character makes a check. And if your character fails, now, in D20, you make the check. You succeed, you knock down the door. You fail, you don't knock down the door. End of story. But in Powered by the Apocalypse, now, D20, in theory, the dice rolls really quick. In Forbidden Lands, there's a little bit more that goes into a dice roll. You're going to be gathering a pool. You're going to be counting up your attributes. You're going to be counting up your skills. You're going to be counting up any relevant gear, right? You're going to look if any talents apply. You might add some extra additional dice because of people helping. Then you're going to roll that big pool of dice, and you're going to look for 1s and 6s. You're going to see if you have any successes in 6s. Then you have to make a decision if you fail or if you didn't roll enough 6s and you need more. Do you want to push? So there's a lot more that goes into a skill check. So, doing all of that and then just saying you fail feels a little underutilized. And to be clear, Forbidden Lands is actually very clear about this in the game book. It just doesn't give you really any good examples of this. And let me see if I can find it real quick. Let me see here. Here we go. I'm going to bring up this PDF. Okay, so we've got this thing here which says failure. Actually, how do I want to arrange this? Bring my keyboard over here. Okay. So it says, when the players succeed in their roles, it's up to the player to describe how. When they fail, it's up for you to decide what happens. Now, to be clear, this is sounding a lot like a GM move versus a player move, right, from Powered by the Apocalypse. The basic rule is that a failure should have a consequence that drives the game forward. Again, this is PBTA language. Avoid letting failure grind the action to a halt. Instead, allow it to push the story in new directions or place the adventurers in even more dire straits. In what is this? In Blades in the Dark term, right? It's escalating the situation, right? You're increasing the danger. The principle is called failing forward. And then it says combat. In combat, it is sufficient consequence of failure to let the turn pass to the opponent. But you may also subject the player character to further complications, let the situation decide. And then that's it. That's all it says about failure in the Game Master Guide. Now, I get what they're trying to do here. They're trying to say that when players make rolls and they fail, you need to make the failure as interesting as the success. The failure, essentially state, becomes a GM move from Powered by the Apocalypse. They just don't really go fully into detail about that, and they don't really talk about it. The only thing they mention is that when you're in combat, missing sucks, and so if you miss, it's already kind of a bad enough kick in the teeth. So you don't need to like put a whammy on them too. But it says, but if you want to, you may also subject the character to further complications, let the situation decide. So I love this idea to do this. However, in order to do this appropriately, I need levers to pull with my characters. I need things that I can mechanically affect them with that will make a difference in the way that they build their characters. Or the way that they play their characters. Cork says, I thought Bob was running the game. Bob is running Dragonbane. I am going to be running the game, but the way that the game is sort of set up, it kind of really allows for guest GMs to come in and sort of run an adventure site with the game calls an adventure site. And the reason why we're doing that, Cork, is because we're all busy guys. And sometimes I'm not going to have something prepped, and it feels shitty to have to like cancel the group session for the whole thing because I burned out. But like if I can go to Bob and say, hey, Bob, you going to run a game? And he can go, yeah, I've got a little bit of a dungeon, prepped. Or I can go to Aaron and I could say, hey, Aaron's like, oh, I actually have this really cool castle that I was working on. They can go ahead and run that for a session or two. And that really takes a lot of the burden off of me. So I think that's kind of where we're going for that. Shadram says, total lack of control, self-control of food. Something I know very well. Same here, buddy. Same here. You fail to hit the dragon, trigger an avalanche. Well, and Shadram, I think this is where the rubber meets the road is this is why some people are really afraid of Powered by the Apocalypse and why they embrace games like, D&D or Pathfinder 2nd Edition, is because they're bad GMs. And I'm not trying to say like that in a bad way. I just mean they don't understand what makes something interesting. They don't understand what makes something fun. At the very least, it should be fun or interesting. And so ideally both, but and I think that's why some people they're like, I want the protection of the rules that specifically say what the GM is allowed to do so that he doesn't ruin it or she doesn't ruin it. Anyways, so I really like this idea of failure. This is from the book, right? It should have a consequence. It should drive the game forward. I love all that. But see, here's the thing. This is what I love about Powered by the Apocalypse games. What I love about Powered by the Apocalypse games is, let's go over. Let me see if I can pull up. A Powered by the Apocalypse game. I got some. Normally I have one open at all times. Okay, here we go. What's up, Tundalus? First stream, and it's an unusual one and a weird one. We don't really have a topic. I'm just kind of workshopping, and I'm already describing and explaining more than I meant to. Okay, so this is Avatar Legends, and in this game you can make moves just like any other Powered by the Apocalypse game. However, excuse me, when a character makes a move, okay, such as, let's say that a character wants to, let's take a look here. This is a good one. When they rely on their skills and training, and this is basically the go-to move to do anything, cool and acrobatic and martial artsy or firebendy or waterbendy or earthbendy, they roll the dice. And now, of course, Powered by the Apocalypse has multiple levels of success. You can get a full hit, a partial hit, or a failure. But on a 7-9, you do it imperfectly. The GM tells you how your approach might lead to unexpected consequences. Accept those consequences, or you can mark one fatigue. So what might be some of those consequences? Well, the cool thing about Avatar is, I thought this would be in the index, but I guess it is not. Maybe it's on page 151, even though it's not the right number or the right name. Nope. Okay. Interesting. I don't know where where they do conditions. Page 101. All right. Well, that's a very interesting idea. Okay. There we go. So here are the conditions of Avatar Legend. You can become afraid, angry, guilty, insecure, or troubled. And these have mechanical effects. It's a description of how your character feels, but it's also a mechanical effect in the game. So what does this do for me now granted, remember, Avatar is a different game than Forbidden Lands. Avatar is a game that is about exploring yourself and finding balance within yourself and learning how to deal with other people and deal with you're a young character by default in this game. So learning how to deal with the inequities of life. So what do the conditions tell us? Well, they tell us that as a result of a check that maybe fails or doesn't quite get there, your character, one of the tools that a game like Avatar gives the game master is the ability to assign one of these conditions. I can decide to give you a condition because it seems fictionally appropriate, or maybe I ask you, the player. So, for example, a criminal, a member of a triple threat triad, right, has just stolen, something from the party, and he's getting away. And the waterbender character comes up and goes, I'm going to look around, and it's like, oh, there's a trough of water for ostrich horses or something. I'm going to water bend the water out of the trough, and I'm going to throw it forward across the street and try to freeze him, in his tracks. And the character they fail. They do not succeed. So obviously the baseline there is, okay, you failed. But as a GM, in order to keep the story moving and to keep the story going, I could say, and you know what? Let's say it was Tundalus, okay, who was my player here, okay? And I said, hey, Tundalus, you don't capture them, they get away, but I also think you should mark a condition. Which condition should you mark? And this is an opportunity for Tundalus to tell us a little bit about their character. They just failed to, stop the bad guy from getting away. Do they feel angry? Do they feel guilty? Do they feel insecure? Like everyone just saw me mess up. I didn't do it well enough. Do they feel guilty? They got away and it was my fault. Do they feel angry? Maybe irrationally so at themselves, but maybe also just at the world around them, right? Maybe they become troubled, like they realize that, that the thief wouldn't have stolen something unless, he had a reason for it. And, maybe this is a bigger threat than we ever possibly imagined. And potentially you could even be afraid. But I mean, the point is you have a lot of levers that the game master or the player can assess to sort of put onto a character to sort of tell us how this is affecting you. I really, really like these. And the reason I can tell you that I really like these is because, number one, it comes up a lot of times in a game. And when a game tells me, hey, don't just let failure be, nothing happens. When the game says failure needs to have consequences, when the failure needs to fail forward, you need these levers because otherwise you risk giving your players a free lunch. And I absolutely hate giving players free lunches, okay? So, right, so when I say free lunch, I mean, a character attempts to do something, they fail, but you're like, well, I need this, I need the game to, I should be failing forward. And so you're like, I don't know, you do it anyways. And that's really it. I don't that's very awkward to me because now you're giving the character, the role didn't matter because they were going to kind of succeed no matter what. And that's what I really, really, don't like about the game. And so for Forbidden Lands, we have this awesome system of resources. And I should point out that Forbidden Lands also has, let me go right here. Okay. So this is Forbidden Lands by default. Okay. We've got resources and it does have conditions. Okay. So Forbidden Lands has, again, the resources of food, water, arrows, and torches. And the conditions are hungry, thirsty, sleepy, and cold. Again, all very, very physical, right? These are physical states of your character. But it's all very like, when I say physical, it's not like emotional. It's not like how your character feels, or it's not how your character is responding to the situation. And I think that is a missed opportunity. Okay. And to kind of, highlight this. Okay. If we take a look at a game like Dragonbane, okay, which is obviously very clearly, it's a mirth and mayhem role playing. It's beer and pretzels, right? We're all just rolling along and having fun and doing whatever. But when we look at Dragonbane has 6 conditions, and those conditions in Dragonbane are things like exhausted, right? Disheartened, sick, angry. Someone has to help me out. Scared, not scarred, scared, afraid, right? And I don't remember which one is the dexterity one. If someone in chat knows what the dexterity Dragonbane condition is, let me know and I'll put it down. Dazed. Thank you. Now, you can already see that if we're playing, now again, don't get me wrong. Clearly, if we're playing a game and a character, doesn't eat food, we can say, okay, we'll give them the hungry condition. But if we're playing the game and they've eaten food and they've drinking water and they've gotten sleep, and it's not cold out, when a character in Forbidden Lands fails a check, I want to be able to have it mean something, not just say, nothing happens or the plot moves forward anyways. I want you to get a little bit of a ding. I want you to be able to get a condition. Now, this is where the workshopping part comes in. There is a lever that we have in Forbidden Lands, which is we have our 4, they're called attributes in this game. Okay. We have strength. We have agility. We have wits. And we have empathy. Okay. 2 physical, 2 mental stats. And of course, remember, in this game, your attribute is not only how many dice you roll with that particular type of skill or particular type of action, but it's also essentially your hit points for that attribute. And so all 4 of these attributes can take damage. So for example, if your strength is 4 and your agility is 4 and your wits is 5 and your empathy is 3, when you roll a strength check or strength-based skill, you're going to add 4 dice to your pool, whereas a wits would add 5. But if you get, say, hit with a rock or a sword, your strength might take damage and go down to 2. And that means that, okay, not only do you only roll 2 dice now, but you're that much closer to being reduced to 0. And when 0 happens, your character breaks. Okay. Now, obviously, with strength, breaking means that, you're probably unconscious. You're in bad shape. Something physical happened to you and messed you up. Wits can break you too. And if wits goes to 0, you basically become, mad with fear. Okay. And you can potentially, run away. So that's called breaking. Okay. Same thing. It's all called breaking. So one lever that we have as a game master is if somebody fails a dice roll, we could say, well, I could make them take a point of strength damage, right? Let's say they were making a strength check and they fail and you say, okay, mark a point of strength damage. But here's the problem. Here's why we can't do that. The reason why we cannot do that is because in this game, pushing, when we push, which means we get to re-roll the dice and try to aim again, pushing risks ability score damage. That's the drawback. That's the downside of pushing. If we push, we might risk damage to our attribute. And remember, the way that it works is when you roll your dice pool and you look at your dice, okay, if a 6 shows up, you have succeeded. If a 1 shows up, it doesn't mean anything. But if you choose to push your roll, you leave the 6s and the 1s on the side that they are, and then you roll the other dice again. And again, only 6s and 1s matter. But now, any 1 that is rolled is active and becomes a bane. And this means that in this case, because we rolled 2 1s, this character would take 2 points of damage to their strength or to their agility or to their wits, whatever you were rolling. So that means that the risk of pushing is that you take ability score damage. So if when you fail, I damage your ability score, you will always push because you're going to be taking ability score damage regardless. So you might as well push so you can at least get a chance of success. And there's a chance that you could get success and no ability score damage. So this isn't a good solution. This is not a lever that we can use in the way that we want to use it. Essentially, the attributes can only really be damaged by, attacks from monsters or from, enemies or foes, or from the players themselves pushing themselves, too hard. So what I would much rather have is the ability to, when a character fails a roll, to be able to say that they are exhausted or disheartened or sickly or angry or scared or dazed or something like that. and have that condition mean something mechanically in the game system, but not have it necessarily damage or destroy their attributes. Now, does this make the game more complicated? Yes. But what it does, number one, Dragonbane is already doing this, so there's that. But number two is that as a GM and as players, I know, especially in a game like this, right? If you're playing a game with very strictly tight rules, as a GM, anything you say goes, okay? And you could let a player, jump 100 feet into the sky and cut somebody in half with their sword if you wanted to. The problem is, if you're playing a game that, has a lot of, balance and is really concerned with trying to create a certain type of play experience, when you do, you can make those changes all you want. But when you make those changes, it's kind of like you're kind of missing the point of why the game system, they went out of their way to make it so balanced. And I know what people say. They're like, oh, I like having a base of having it be balanced. I don't think so. I don't think that is actually a valid reason to suddenly start changing things, because the whole point of the game is that it's balanced. I could play a game like this. This game isn't balanced, right? There is no CR system in this game. And so as a result, I can just, I don't have to worry about fucking anything up, is basically what it comes down to. And I know that my players are going to want, in a game that's not balanced, and a game that has sort of more of a combat as war feel to it, my players are absolutely going to be constantly figuring out trying to do weird shit and throwing curveballs at me left and right. And I'm going to have to be making rulings left and right. I know this. I know this group. I know me. And as a GM, I love to be empowered to negotiate with my players. This is something that I do all the time. And when I negotiate it with a player, basically, a player wants to do something, and I tell them the cost. And then they may say, cost is too high. What if we get this instead? And I say, fine, I will lower the price, but then you're only going to get this much success. And we go back and forth and we negotiate. And in order to negotiate, you have to have things that you can negotiate on. And that is where having all these levers comes in handy. This is where having all these conditions comes in handy. So I really like the idea of these, conditions in the game. However, I love the resource dice. So my thought process was, what if there were non-tangible resource dice? Things that aren't like physical things that you can touch and see and smell. What if some of the things that we associate with a character, with a person that might matter in a survival type game, what if those were resource dice too? And we know how food is consumed. Every time you eat food, you roll the resource die. And every time water is consumed, you roll the resource die. Every time you fire an arrow from your bow, you roll the resource die. But what if these non-tangible resource dice give us a lever that we can now pull, so that when a player does something, we can represent the potential risk or the potential consequence of that action, being that one of these non-tangible resources is depleted. All right. And now, of course, on the stream, I talked about the idea of making willpower one of those resources. But actually, I kind of like the idea of having more than one of these intangible resources, because they give me ways that I can push your character. And I really like that you can roll the die and maybe you'll be fine, or maybe your resource will deplete. Let me see here. Let's see. More conditions on breaking makes sense. Getting strength broken from a failed crafting check, making you unconscious, seems silly. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second, Shadrum, too. Amaya says, doesn't the critical injury system already take care of that, or do you mean on non-attack breaks? I mean on non-attack breaks. Exactly. Like, obviously, when you're being damaged and you're attacked, that makes total sense. And when you go to 0 strength and you have to roll on a critical hit table and your character's laying unconscious in the heap in the ground and they might be dead, or they might have their arm cut off, or they might be bleeding from a gashed forehead, that's all great. That's awesome. That's perfect. But let me walk you through an example, okay, of the game. Your character, okay, has strength of 5. You're a strong character, okay? And you have the crafting skill. And you have 2 dice in crafting, which is awesome, okay? So, your character, after a day of adventure, is a little damaged. They're a little beat up. Their strength is down to 2, okay? Ouch. Things have been tough. Now, there's no spells, really, I mean, there is, but it's, rare and risky. There's no treat wounds check to get you, just top you off to full. The only way to get your strength back up to full is to rest, okay? Because this doesn't really represent damage. This just represents, like sort of general fatigue, okay? But your buddy's bow, okay? Their bow got really messed up. And they want you to repair it before, because they're the person who stays up during the night. Maybe they're a goblin, so they can actually see in the dark. And they go, my bow is pretty much unusable. I'd love to have my bow for the night shift so that I can, shoot something if it gets close to us. Can you repair my bow? You're the best crafter in the group. And so you go, yeah, I can do that. So that's what I'm going to do with my turn. I'm going to try to repair this the goblin's bow. So you roll 4d6, right? 2 from your strength and 2 from your crafting. And you get a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5. Okay? So no banes, no successes. All right? And of course, this is where some people, this is the question is this a roll you could push or not? Right? Because the game book even says, like, and a lot of people talk online about, like, should you allow people to push if the situation isn't completely dire and someone doesn't have a gun to their head? And a lot of other people say, yeah, if you do that, though, people won't be able to push. And the game kind of needs you to push in order to give you willpower. So also the crafting person here says, hey, getting this done is really important. Okay. I think I should push. So you push. Okay. And you roll a 1 and a 1 and a 4 and a 6. You get your 6 and you partially repair the bow. And then your character collapses into unconsciousness, barely able to move. What? Right? This is a problem. Now that is what the game does, okay? The game doesn't use this, doesn't call this a condition, but the game rules have a rule for what happens when your character goes to 0 strength. Your strength is broken. Now, if it happens from a weapon attack, you roll on the critical hit table. But if it happens from anything else, like pushing yourself, you collapse into, you're basically unconscious. Now, that seems a little extreme. Now, I could freely admit, I could see a situation where if maybe the check wasn't crafting, maybe the check was the might check or the endurance check, right? These are skills in the game too. Might is, can you move the massive boulder? Make a might check. You fail. I'm going to push. You get the success, and then your character collapses in unconsciousness. I think we can all agree that not only does that sound awesome, but that sounds appropriate. It sounds cool. Everybody at the table, this is what I call, and again, I play with players who are, from newer players like Bob to very experienced and veteran players like my friend George and Tim and Aaron. I call it the head nod test, okay? If you look around the table and everybody's going, yep, that makes sense. Okay, everybody's buying into the game. They're buying into the mechanics. There's no tension. There's no friction between what is happening in the fiction. Well, it's the fiction friction. There's no friction between what's happening in the fiction and what's happening in the game mechanics. When you get friction between some of those, when you've played as many RPG systems as we have, like a lot of people do probably experience frictional interfaces with their game mechanics, but because they are playing 5th edition D&D come hell or high water, maybe they don't even know any other game design, they just deal with it because they go, what other choice do I have? But when you're our group and you've played 1.5 million RPGs and you know that there's 1.5 million more that you've never even touched, when a game gets, starts to chafe you, it can be kind of like, what are we even doing here? Maybe we should be playing something else. It can happen really quickly, and you can lose the buy-in of your players. So I promise, and the other thing too is like I'm telling you, this would destroy the mood of your game. This is a pretty tough situation. The group maybe got their ass beat a little bit. The bows are broken, the armor's damaged. You're going back to the camp. You're not sure if the orcs or whatever evil was, what you were fighting is maybe tracked you back to your camp. It's a dangerous situation. But if one of your players rolls this, at least, and again, this is for my table, someone's going to be like, oh, I went really hard on that bow, huh? I guess I just worked the wood too hard, right? And then it's just like it was too much for me, and I just passed out. Good thing I finished first from working the wood, and then I collapsed into unconsciousness because it was just so overwhelming, right? They're gonna make fun of it. They're gonna make it into like a weird thing because it is kind of weird. Okay. Similarly, let's use another example. All right, our character has a wits score of 2 or 3. Maybe they've been damaged, but maybe their wits. 2 is a totally normal attribute to have in this game. And they have the lore skill, okay, with 3 dice, okay? And basically, the group spies an ancient ruin far in the distance, okay? And they ask the character, the lore character, hey, what do you know about that place? So the character makes a lore roll, and they don't get any 6s. So they push, and they roll 2 1s for their wits, and their wits break, and the character becomes paralyzed with fear and starts running off into the distance. Because we asked you what you knew? Also, you failed, so you don't even know what is in the ruins. Because someone might say, oh, maybe they're terrified of what's inside those ruins. Yeah, but what if what's inside the ruins isn't terrifying? Also, the character failed. They don't know what's inside of the ruins, right? This is a very weird problem. And I promise you, this will be like kind of like a record scratch moment at my game table. Maybe not at your game table. At my game table, this would create a frictional problem. And there would be this look of like, at me, the game master, are you really going to allow that to happen? Because and by the way, no words are being spoken. This is all just done through like eyes and glances. Are you really going to allow that to happen? Because if you do, that's really dumb. And, someone else is going, what is even happening right now? You're losing the respect of your players. You're losing the respect of the game. And I would at my table. So I need to be very, very aware of these kind of, sort of interface problems with the game. So as a result, I need more tools in order to sort of affect the character. So for example, if a character goes to wits 0, the rule in the game is they become paralyzed with fear and or run away from their source of their fear at their highest possible speed. We could think of that as like, that's like the severe effect, okay? What we need is a lesser effect, right? We need other things that we can assess that can give us better tools in order to be able to allow characters to have failures and even breaking without it being completely ridiculous. I'll give you another one just so that we're all on the same page here. Okay? Your character's agility is 3, and their sleight of hand, okay, which includes lock picking skill, is 2. Now, they took some damage to their agility. Maybe they pushed earlier, and their agility's down to 2. So they go to pick a lock. They roll a 1, a 5, and a 5, and they say, I'm going to push my luck. So the 1 stays locked in. They re-roll the 3 5s, and then they get a 1 and a 6 and a 6. Your character has picked the lock and then falls to the ground paralyzed. That's what happens when your agility breaks. You fall to the ground motionless. I was picking a lock, right? I get that my agility broke and there should be a consequence, but I think we can all agree that doesn't feel like it fits the fiction. The fiction is something that I am very, it's very important to me, and I want to preserve that as much as I can. All right. So that was a very long-winded way of kind of describing why I'm doing what I'm doing. So now the question is, how do I do this? How do I accomplish this? And how do I not break the game? Okay. Lockpick fail raw. You collapse from exhaustion. So this is what happened. Yeah, he's quoting from the book here. If you fail and you collapse from exhaustion. You can only crawl and wheeze. You can't perform any other actions, and you can't roll for any skills. So that's what happens if you push yourself too hard on lockpicking. All right. Now again, this is how my brain works. All right. I want there. The door opens, but kicks you first in the net. It's a hell of a lock. Where can we get one of those? Okay. I want to distinguish, okay, between minor, we'll call them consequences, and major consequences. Okay. Right now in the book, when your character breaks, okay, you get a major consequence. Now, they don't have names per se, right? But you can see from the example in the book, it's pretty rough, right? Like, when your strength breaks, you collapse to the ground unconscious, so maybe you're basically, that could be, you could think of that as if we were to make a condition name for what the book text is. Actually, let me pull it up just so we're all on the same page, because I do want you all to sort of understand what I'm going for here. I don't really need to, but I need your help. Okay. Okay, here we go. This is what happens if you're broken. You're knocked senseless. Okay. You're not dead, but you can only mumble through the pain. Okay. So maybe unconscious is a bad term. Barely conscious is another term. Okay. That's again what happens if your strength breaks. And again, the way that your strength breaks is you could have taken it because someone hit you with an axe. That's awesome. That effect right there, awesome for having your strength reduced to 0 through an axe to the face. Additionally, you're going to roll on that critical hit table. Could kill you. But if the character was crafting or using their strength or, swinging a sword, it feels a little, maybe in some situations, the fiction would support that. But in other situations, it really wouldn't. Now, take a look at agility. You collapse from exhaustion. Okay, well, what are the things that we're doing with agility? Well, with agility, we're doing things like sleight of hand and scouting and marksmanship, right? I want to scout really hard. You collapse from exhaustion. By the way, to be clear, this isn't like scouting like you're moving ahead. It's like a, sorry, that's wits. I'm thinking of something else. Stealth. That's the one I'm thinking of. Stealth. You're trying to stealth so hard that you collapse into unconsciousness. I mean, I think we can all agree that just seems unlikely to happen and a bit foolish. I mean, there might be situations in the fiction where it comes up, but again, so we've got this unconsciousness. We've got this, this other version of unconsciousness, right? We've got the paralyzed with fear, right? Effect that happens when your wits break. These are all very major consequences. What I want to do is put minor consequences in the game. And specifically, I want to be able to distinguish between a character who succeeds or a character who fails, a character who pushes and fails, and a character who pushes and succeeds. Okay? So, for example, let's go back to our example of the lock picking. This was our lock picking character example, right? Our character had a 2 agility after taking some damage. Their sleight of hand, which is lock picking, is 2. And this was what happened. They rolled a 1, and then they pushed, and then they rolled another 1. So their agility goes to 0. They are broken. But they did succeed. Okay? They did succeed. So I don't want them to collapse into unconsciousness. It just doesn't make any sense to me. What I want to give them instead is a minor consequence that feels fictionally appropriate. I want to be able to give them something like, maybe they're distracted now, or, because they were concentrating so hard. Maybe they're, I don't, I'm just using like generic terms here. They're a little burned out. Maybe they're frustrated because it took so long, right? Frustrated, right? I want a kind of idea, right? Disheartened. These are I'm taking these from Dragonbane, basically. I want to be able, melancholy, ill-tempered. I want to be able to basically say, hey, your character broke, and in the fiction, I am going to assess you a penalty now. But I do not want it to be that your character collapses into an unconscious heap and literally might need hours, to sort of, recover. Yeah, discombobulated. That's a great one too. What about? I wrote distracted. That's a great one. So the idea here is that it gives me as the GM more levers that I can pull. A little bit put out, and I don't need 55 of these. All right, I only need 6 of these. And here's the thing: I don't even have to tie them specifically to a given attribute stat, right? I could use fatigued for someone's wits breaking. I could use fatigued for someone's agility breaking. I could use fatigue for someone's strength breaking, right? Frustrated, if a character is trying to lift a heavy boulder, they push and they succeed, but their strength breaks, right? And, basically it was really, really tough. Maybe they're frustrated because of the fact that, this whole thing is just destroying them and wearing them down. Maybe they become disheartened. Maybe they're a bit burned out or something like that. This gives me the right tools that I need so I can fit the fiction to the mechanics, and I can fit the mechanics to the fiction. I can even ask the player, kind of like Avatar, what do we know about your character? Now, again, the key thing here is, this is the key thing. Avatar is all about the character's emotional state, okay? And it's about learning how to interact with people. This is a game of overland wilderness survival. But let me tell you something. And again, I know I'm biased here and I'm speaking only from my personal experience. But, I hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2018. I spent months in the woods hiking. Obviously, there's a physical component to the hiking. But let me tell you something. While I may not have worried, Avatar had the things like, I'm embarrassed, I'm insecure. I don't know that I felt embarrassed or insecure. I don't know if that was a thing that I was dealing with, but I'll tell you this. I felt frustrated sometimes. I felt disheartened sometimes. I might get distracted on the trail. I could definitely become burned out or fatigued. Over 50%, I think like 60%, maybe even higher, 70% of people who hike the Appalachian Trail fail. They don't complete it. And why? Is it because they break their legs or they get a ton of blisters? No. Most people quit because they run out of willpower. They become too frustrated, too disheartened, too burned out, and they have to get off the trail. It's not about the physical state of being. It's a mental state of being. And that is something that, this game is an opportunity to sort of share that experience with some of my players. And so when you look at Forbidden Lands and you look at what they're talking about here, okay, you've got the conditions are hungry, thirsty, sleepy, cold, food, water, arrows, torches. It's all very physical. It's none of it has to do with the emotional component, with the character's strength of will, the character's strength of perseverance. So I want to be able to reflect that in the game through resources, because I think the mental resources, the ability to dig deep, if you will, is just as important as the physical resources. Now, I'm so happy I asked for your input. Yes, I saw this. Peeved, having one of those days, somewhat miffed, a bit put out, just going through it. This is the best one. I can't even. Now, Call of Cthulhu has a sanity resource dice. Again, that might not be a horrible idea. I do think that our wits damage does reflect that, because when our wits break from a fear attack in Forbidden Lands, you roll on the horror table. So like the idea of like our character's sanity being drained is already kind of reflected in the game. If we get broken by a fear attack, we roll on the horror table. But there are other ways for our wits to break, and we want to be able to sort of reflect that. Now, I agree that conditions don't have to be tied to specific attributes. What's more important is to be clear about consequences before pushing, I think. Peter, I completely agree with you. And I've said this on many of our Blades in the Dark streams. I said, you need to let the players know what's at stake, or at the very least, the consequences that follow should make complete sense in the fiction, right? And so if you ever give a player a consequence and they feel like you pulled one over on them, or you kind of were doing a gotcha on them, you have failed. If the player goes, oh yeah, that is totally accurate. Or maybe the player even goes, you know what? Actually, I think my character would be this condition too, because it feels right. And this game is giving me a mechanic to reflect that. And I feel like it would be appropriate for it to be there. So I think that's a well said point. So the reason I kind of went down this track is because a little bit more background, but so when we played 5th edition, we hacked it a lot and we called it Dungeon Time Extreme. Okay. And every character had a resource. Okay. So your Constitution score equaled your character's resilience. This is from 5 Torches Deep base. And your character's wisdom score, okay, equaled your character's willpower. So, you know, if your con was 14, your resilience was 14. If your wisdom was 10, your willpower was 10. Now, this was a resource that the characters would only restore to full after a 1 week plus rest back in town. Okay. I'm talking nice bed, inns, you know, good meals, right? No danger, like a true rest. And the cycle of play, we were playing Caves of Chaos, keeping the Borderlands. The cycle of play is the characters would spend time in town. They would use their money to buy new things and upgrade things and level up and do all this sort of stuff. They would leave town full of resilience, full of willpower. And then they would journey to the caves. Now, the journey itself was long and arduous. And once they were at the caves, okay, they would set up camp. A partially defensible area where they could retreat to near the caves. You know, this is the long journey to the caves. They're not going to be going to the caves and back to the town, to the caves and back to the town. In fact, you know, think about Forbidden Lands. You know, if the towns are very far away and the adventure site might be days away with all the random encounters. Your characters aren't going to want to be doing that. So the characters would set up a camp and then they would go explore the caves. After a while, some of their resources were down. Hit points were down. But while they were in the caves, I was also attacking their resilience and their willpower. But the players were also spending their resilience and their willpower. Resilience let a barbarian rage again. So if a barbarian raged, boop, down to 13. Oh, I rage again. Boop, down to 12. Bob, Bob fails a check. He's trying to push open a door. And I go, Bob, you struggle, but the door will not budge. After a minute or two, you are panting. You are, covered in sweat. Boop. You take a point of resilience damage. And resilience is going to 0. Willpower is going to 0. But you need that stuff in order to be able to play and use all your cool abilities. So eventually the characters go, you know what? Let's go back to the camp that we set up and basically take a short rest. Except, and this is a house rule from the DMG 5th edition. In my game, basically a long rest was a week in town and a short rest was a 1 night sleep. In other words, in order to short rest, you actually had to sleep. You had to, spend a night at the camp. So the characters wouldn't go back to town. They would go back to their little camp. But and by the way, this was not in the rule set, but this is what happened because I play with people like Aaron Smith, who has played games with me like Torchbearer, and because it's Aaron and he's playing combat as war and he's always trying to hustle and he's always trying to come up with stuff. So while they're at camp, he's like, hey, can I do something? I get that we can only restore our resilience and our willpower to full by going back to town and resting for a week. But while we're here in camp, is there anything I could do, a check that I could make, some resources that I could spend that might give us a little bit of recovery, right? Just a little bit of extra recovery. And so in my case, I said, yeah, like if you cooked, everybody could eat their meal, but if you cook a really, really good meal, a character could regain a point of resilience or a point of willpower, their choice. And so suddenly it was like, oh, cool. Can somebody cook? Can we make a nice meal instead of just having these, shitty trail rations? And of course, we're all having fun and playing around with it. And so there was the idea of like, hey, what if I pass around a bottle of dwarven liquor, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe that restores the willpower. Okay. But it lowers your resilience, and everyone's like laughing, or maybe it does the opposite. I should say the resilience goes up, but the willpower goes down, right? Cause you're drinking this dwarven alcohol, and it became this sort of resource exchange mini game. Right. And so the group would do as best as they can, but eventually the resources would all decay. They would be done with the camp after one night, and then they would go back to the caves and adventure some more. And then they would go back to camp and they would repeat this process. And what would happen is something like resilience, it might start at 14 and then go down to 8 and then go back up to 11 and then go down to 6 and then go up to 9 and then go down to 5. And oops, it only went up to 6. And then it went down to 3. And now the group starts thinking, maybe it's not time for us to camp. Maybe it's time for us to head back to town because we've done the best that we could. We've tried to stretch this out as long as we can, but the resources have eventually dwindled as they are meant to be, and I want to return to town. So in Dungeon Time Extreme, I had these two stats. I had resilience and I had willpower, and it was really cool as a GM to be able to use those two tracks, and my players really enjoyed, and it also gave me fun tools like when the group saw, the slaughtered remains of a merchant caravan that the orcs or the gnolls had, torn apart. I could be like, hey, everybody take a point of willpower damage. That is really, or make a will saving throw to see if you can resist the horribleness of what you're seeing. Oh, you failed? Take a point of willpower damage. And it's not making them more likely to die in combat. It's not making them, it's not giving them a penalty to their attack roll, but it is an important resource, and I am attacking it. And so that was really, really awesome to me. So that is the reason why I want in Forbidden Lands willpower to be a resource die. Just like food and water and torches and arrows, I want willpower to be something that a character has, manages, loses, but they do it through playing the game, not through the meta action of pushing. And again, as someone who spent time, and I wasn't fighting evil monsters or risking death every other day from random encounters that could savagely kill me, I can tell you that when I was hiking on the trail, I could definitely, like, when it started, boy, I had all the willpower in the world, okay? But I'll be honest with you, that first day, that first mountain was brutal to a novice hiker like myself, okay? Mount Katahdin kicked my ass. And I'm sure throughout the course of that, I'm not even kidding here. I have a video evidence of this because my GoPro that was mounted on my my pack was on when this happened. I had climbed up to the upper elevations of Mount Katahdin. I was above the tree line, right? So this is the point where it's too cold and too high of elevation for trees to really grow. So it's just all rock. And at this point, you're kind of rock climbing. They've drilled bolts and handles into some of the rock faces to make it easier. And I was coming up over a ledge and I slipped off and I fell backwards and I landed on a ledge, probably only about 8 or 9 feet down. Okay. But And I probably realistically wasn't in any danger, but like another 4 or 5 feet and I would have fallen hundreds of feet. And this was day 1. Let me tell you something. My willpower took a hit, okay, that first day, okay? Like, the GM basically said, make a willpower check. And I rolled the D12, and let me tell you, I rolled a 2, okay? And it went down to D10, okay? And then the day was getting long, and I had to hike to the top of this mountain, and I had to hike back down before nightfall, before it got pitch black. Every passing minute was wearing on me, not physically, mentally, my willpower. Okay, so my willpower was being taxed left and right. I might even argue that it got all the way down to D6, about to run out. And I can tell you, here's how you can tell that I was about to run out. I wasn't physically exhausted, but there was a point where I was getting close to the point where I was like, I don't think I can do this. I think I have to stop. I think I have to turn around and go home and give up before I really even began. And then I started worrying, like, am I even going to be able to get down? Am I going to have to call the rescue helicopter to come get me on the very first day? Am I going to have to activate my emergency satellite beacon? That was fucking with me way more than anything physical. But I did reach the top. And I'm standing on top of the world. And not only is the view gorgeous, but I fucking did it. You bet your ass that restored up my willpower. That gave me a huge boost of confidence, right? So, that's where I think the game, the idea of the willpower resource is really awesome. Now let me defend Forbidden Lands here a little bit, and because I like the game a lot, but also critique it. You could argue, which is fine, that my character was making a agility move check, okay, to climb to the top of the mountain, okay, and my agility is not that great, and my movement skill is only 1, and so I rolled a 2, a 3, a 5, and a 5. I got no successes, but you know what? I'm made of stronger stuff than that. I decide to push on. Okay. And I roll a 1, a 5, and a 5, and a 6. So yeah, my agility took a little bit of damage because I did fall off of that freaking mountain a little bit, but I got my success. And in core rules is written, Forbidden Lands, I would gain 1 point of willpower. This feels completely correct, right? I pushed on, I took some damage, I succeeded. But the problem is, I could have failed and still taken the agility damage and still gain a willpower. And so it's a little strange to me that, or if I didn't roll a 1, if I rolled a 5, 5, 5, 6, then you push, you succeed. You don't gain a willpower. You only gain willpower equal to the number of attribute points damage you take from the push. So, it's kind of weird. You suffer, a point of damage. You gain willpower. But if you push through and succeed, but you don't take any damage, you don't gain any willpower. That feels a little inelegant to me. I could see a situation where it feels awesome, right? Where, the character takes a little bit of damage, but they also succeed, and it shows them that they can do this, and they gain a point of willpower. Very cool. But in the situation where you push through and you succeed, but, you didn't take any damage, so you don't gain any willpower. That feels a little weird. And the situation where you take a bunch of damage and you fail, you didn't accomplish it, gain a willpower. That also feels very strange to me. So I really like the idea now of instead of using willpower as a thing, I like using willpower as a die. But there's a problem. Here's the problem. In the game, so this is the, this is a sort of Right. Neutromancer says, I think in this case, the willpower gain is a compensation for failure, not a logical thing. Except Neutromancer, you get the willpower whether you succeed or fail. So it's not really a compensation for failure thing. In fact, Neutromancer, you could push the roll, re-roll all the dice, not get any ones, not get any sixes. So you've pushed, you still didn't succeed, you failed, and you also didn't gain a willpower either. Oh, I see. You're saying compensation for damage. Got it. Yes. Yeah, but in that case, it's very metagamey, and it starts to feel more like a fate point than something that I want. This game feels very grounded, and I love fate, okay, and I love fate points. But when you start talking about like compensating a character for a attribute damage through the rules of the push roll, it's starting to get too gamey for me. But yeah, it just doesn't feel as. It doesn't feel as simulationist to me. I want willpower to be something that is restored by things that would restore your willpower. But I also like the consequences. Now, I won't lie here. I just discovered this. So there is a Forbidden Lands book of house rules that somebody made. It's on Drivethru RPG. And as a result, I haven't. It's called Reforged Power, and I finally bought it, and I haven't looked through all of it yet. But they have something in there. This just made me feel so. This made me feel like, oh, this is so cool. They had an idea in there of something called the Hygiene resource, and much as you might surprise, the hygiene is how clean are you, right? So you leave town spick and span. You're D12. The longer you spend in the woods and doing dirty shit and clawing through the mud and the dirt and all this other stuff. And then when your hygiene gets to 0, okay, when you're run out of food, you become hungry. When you run out of water, you become thirsty. When you run out of hygiene, it gives you a new condition. They created a new condition, and it is called filthy. Now, obviously, when you're out there exploring dungeons and, trapping through the wilderness, this doesn't really matter that much. But remember, there are 3 types of adventure sites in Forbidden Lands. There's the dungeon, but there's also the castle, and there's also the village. And this really resonated with me because I was filthy when I was hiking. And if I spent, more... even a couple days, but if I went like 7 or 10 days without going, I mean, you were filthy. You didn't shower. You're in the woods. You're laying, you're rolling around the dirt. You're gross. You smell so bad. Like, and you don't even notice it until like you take a shower and you get clean in town, and then you are all cleaned and you're wearing freshly laundered clothes. And then you go and meet up with some other hikers who haven't showered, and you're like, oh my God, you smell horrible. Now, Amaya says, that seems like that would really only work for humans or elves. I can't see wolfkin or goblins really being concerned with hygiene. Amaya, I actually agree with you to the point where I could easily see that a wolfkin or a goblin is going to frequently run it. They may not care about their hygiene, but if they go to a village of humans, then the humans are going to be like, this is a disgusting animal, right? And they're going to be even more hatred and prejudice. But if you went to a town of goblins and everybody was filthy, yeah, maybe that doesn't do anything, And so I think you could absolutely make it feel appropriate and diegetic, So yeah. And Nutrimancer wants to be clear. It's more like you got compelled, so now you get paid for it, rather than it hurts so good. It hurts so good, I get more will. To be clear, I like the idea of the currencies and resources instead of the push damage. I just don't see the weirdness on what gives you willpower versus what doesn't. Seems intentional. Well, yeah. So I think I think what it really comes down to is I want willpower to be something that the group tops off when they are truly well rested, and it is a resource that sort of falls apart. It's pushing allows you to like gain back more willpower the longer you're in the the dungeon. And the more that you're pushing yourself to the limits, the more willpower you get. And the game says, because it's showing you what you're made of. But in my experience, the opposite is true. The opposite is true. In my experience, the more you're pushing yourself past your limits, okay, to me, that is going to cost me willpower. Okay, not give me willpower. All right. And you could think about this in real life terms. You're studying for a test. Okay. In Forbidden Lands terms, maybe you're making a wits lore check. You fail. You roll the dice, you fail. But this is you studying for midterm or for finals. It's late, you failed, and you're just like, I cannot study. I cannot learn this. I cannot learn this. You want to push on. You are going to push on. Does that sound like something that would give you willpower or take willpower? I don't know about you, but to me, that is something that takes willpower. That a strong-willed person with the discipline to sit down and say, I am going to do this and I'm going to push through, even if it, sends my brain into tapioca, even if it hurts me. Think about like a lifter. Okay, they're in Forbidden Lands term, someone's lifting a really heavy weight. In Forbidden Lands terms, they're making a strength might check. They fail. They're trying to get the weight up and they can't do it. They've just failed. They want to push. They don't care that they might hurt themselves. They don't care that they might rip a bicep or strain their back. They want to push through the pain, push through the awfulness. What does that sound like? That sounds like that is them using their willpower as a resource to push through. And anybody who's lifted will tell you that if your willpower is low and you try to get into the gym, you're probably not even going to be able to really, you're not going to be able to push yourself. People always say the key to succeeding in the gym is to push yourself. And if you go into the gym and your willpower's tapped out, people will go, yeah, it was a shitty day in the gym. I didn't really push myself. Because pushing yourself takes willpower, not gives willpower, in my personal opinion. Sean is in here for the Secret Thursday stream. He's a day early, folks. He meant Wednesday. Sean, thank you. Again, this is a totally just random bonus stream just because I was thinking about these issues anyways. And I kind of wanted to just talk about them and share them all with you. So this is not a typical and usual stream, but thank you, Sean. Put another 20 in and correct yourself. So it seems more like you like the word willpower for a new mechanic, but it was already taken. No, that's not it. I haven't read Forbidden Lands, but sounds more like a meta. I haven't read FB. I assume you mean Forbidden Lands. It sounds more like a meta currency, right? The ups and downs or whatever. That is almost true, Nutrimancer, except there are monsters in the game, scary monsters, undead monsters, that can drain your character's willpower. And so that makes me think that it is a little bit more diegetic than they expect it to be. Because again, these horrifying creatures can drain your willpower away. And so if it was purely a meta currency, that wouldn't be the case. So that is my thought process on that. But I agree with you otherwise. I don't actually know what willpower is used for in the game, so maybe I'm just talking about backside. Well, the answer is, Nutrimancer, is that in the game, you basically have talents. And talents are kind of like they're like your feats, or they're like your powers from the game. And they often cost a willpower point. And this also includes casting magical spells. In order to cast a spell, you have to spend one or more willpower. In order to use some of your special talents, your special abilities, your racial ability, you almost always have to spend willpower. Chase says, as someone who is currently on hour 12 doing work for a deadline tomorrow, I can promise you I've spent my willpower for the day. Absolutely, Chase. And I think that, that's great. And so someone like Chase has depleted their willpower. Their ability to keep pushing is getting limited. It's almost run out. I would argue that if somebody is out of willpower, they shouldn't be able to push themselves, right? What is pushing? Pushing is the ability for the mind, right, to push the body beyond what it thinks it's capable of doing, right? That is the essential nature of willpower. And willpower is a resource that can be used up as easily as an arrow from a quiver. And we know how willpower is restored. It sometimes comes down to the individual. It sometimes comes down to just rest and relaxation, true, rest for a character. Something pleasurable, something restored, but it could also be something that boosts your spirit. Remember, I described when I made it to the top of that mountain, my willpower was restored. I got the boost to keep going. So you can turn willpower into something the players get from diegetic, not from meta currency, but from diegetic progression. And I think that is, I think, really important. I'm still doing this. You make me look like a lightweight. Well, I started streaming late. I didn't start streaming at 7. So, it is not free, Nutrimancer. Our lowest tier is like $5. I think there might be a $3 tier, but it's limited. But there might be some spots open. But otherwise, it is $5. I got the broken condition about 10 a.m. today. All I can do is crawl, and I can't make any more checks. Yes. Maybe each person should have different triggers to gain willpower, like extrovert versus introvert. I 100% agree with you, Nutrimancer. I think that's awesome. I don't necessarily know there should be extrovert versus introvert, but I like the idea that each character, maybe there's a list of things. What restores your willpower? What gives you that boost to go on? And on this channel that I am a big fan of Legend of the Five Rings. And in Legend of the Five Rings, your character has 2 resources. They have fatigue and they have strife. And strife is, how much emotional turmoil that your character is, exploring and experiencing. And your strife can keep building up. And if your strife builds up too much, your character will become compromised and might unmask. But guess what? In Legend of the Five Rings, your samurai has a list of passions, things that they're passionate about. Maybe they're passionate about ikebana, flower arranging. Maybe they're passionate about poetry. Maybe they're passionate about going to see, I'm trying to think of a kabuki theater, right? Maybe they're passionate about spending time with a geisha. In the game, when your character goes and indulges in their passion, guess what? It lowers their strife, right? Part of being able to be a samurai is knowing how to manage your emotional turmoil and basically keeping that in check. But at the end of the day, a samurai in Legend of the Five Rings is just a human. You're just a man. You're just a woman. And so at the end of the day, you have to be realistic about what it is that you can do to control your strife. And if you don't do those things and you don't see to your emotional well-being, your character's strife will eventually reach the point where it'll break and your character will unmask, right? Your character will say something horrible and out of line and something that is very dishonorable and something horrible for a samurai to see. So this is very fun. Now obviously this exact situation and mechanics, it's not appropriate for Forbidden Lands. But what I do think is appropriate for Forbidden Lands is this idea of more so than their torches, more so than their steel. Okay. What makes these characters stand out is their will to go where place other people will not go, to journey into those dangerous locations that other people have not gone to. I'm playing the Ravenlands. This is a world that has been trapped by a demonic blood mist for generations, and only now has it lifted. And for the first time in over 100 years, are people leaving their village. If those aren't people who aren't, accomplishing their feats through sheer will, I don't know, what is. Yeah, it could tie to your pride. I think that is what Alia said on the Discord, on the Knights of the Last Call Discord. I think she mentioned tying it to the pride. I think it was her. But yeah, you could do pride. You could do dark secret. Okay. Exactly. And it's a great way to show what inspires you and drives you and can change its develop. Now, Golden Cat, you just really inspired me for something. Let me side tangent, but it's okay. We're all talking about mechanic. Will Derek implement this into his game? All right. We're going to talk about keys. I don't think we've actually talked about keys before on this channel. Okay. So there is a game, an RPG. It's a fairly old RPG. Let me see if I can find it. It was written in 2006. Okay. Let me pull this up. So the name of this is called The Shadow of Yesterday. This is a game by Clinton Nixon. Okay. And it's usually called Tosoy on channels and stuff like that. Okay. So The Shadow of Yesterday is a early indie RPG. In fact, this was an RPG that really inspired Apocalypse World, Blaze in the Dark, John Harper. It inspired a lot of people. Okay. But one of the things that this game introduced is this idea of keys. And I'm going to take a screenshot here rather than go to it. Here we go. Okay. Here we go. So keys are the way that you get experience points in Tosoy. Okay. And this is an example of a key from Tosoy. Now, if you've played Lady Blackbird at all by John Harper, you're somewhat familiar with this. Okay. So this is an example, okay, that he's giving in the book. Your character might have the key of conscience. Your character has a soft spot for those weaker than their opponents. Gain 1 XP every time your character helps someone who cannot help themselves. Gain 2 XP every time your character defends someone with might who is in danger and cannot save themselves. Gain 5 XP every time your character takes someone in an unfortunate situation and changes their life to where they can help themselves. And then it has the buy-off. Ignore a request for help. The buy-off is a special part about keys. Whenever a player has a character perform the action shown in the buy-off, the player can erase the key and gain 10 experience points. But once bought off, a character can never have the same key again. Okay? Now, unlike other abilities of the game, the number of keys a character can have is limited. A character can have no more than 5 keys at a time. This is how you gain experience in Tosoy. Every character, through play and through their character creation process, comes up with a set of 5 keys. Now, I don't think you start with 5. You can build up to 5, but you might start with like 2 or 3. But every character is different, and every character is going to gain experience points a little bit differently. It's going to motivate their actions. But the key here is they also have a buy-off, something that can totally change their character. Okay. Now, this is absolutely a huge amount of experience points in Forbidden Lands. I would 100% adjust this. I'm not even saying I would use this, Amaya. I'm more thinking and waxing philosophically, because we might use this for experience points in Forbidden Lands, but we could also potentially use this for willpower. Like, let's say the character had the key of greed, okay? And you gain willpower by, finding treasure, right? That's what keeps you motivated. That's what keeps you going, is finding treasure. And maybe you gain, 1 step of willpower every time you find a notable treasure, but you can gain 2 steps of willpower if you find a real significant and major treasure. But maybe the key of greed has a buy-off, right? Which is that your character ignores the treasure to do the right thing, right? If you're thinking about what this moment would look like, imagine the end of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Indiana Jones, he has the key of, I guess, I don't know, archaeology, okay? And he's reaching down to get the Holy Grail. It's about to slip, just like the girl did who just died. And his father says, Indiana, let it go. And you can see him torn between the two of it. And then he takes his father's hand and he gives up on the Grail. He rejects it. And that's a character growth moment for him, right? So maybe our character with the key of greed is they pass up an opportunity to gain a great treasure or a great payday in order to help somebody else or to do the right thing, right? Or maybe a buy-off is they give a tremendous amount of wealth away to those in need. Now, when you do this, you're rewarded. Maybe your willpower gets maxed out because it's you discovering a new part about your character. Maybe it's a big bonus of experience points, but you can never have that key again. You have shown that your character has overcome the greed that once, motivated them and ruled their life. You'll have to find a new key, right? And I think that is I think that's really really interesting, right? I think this is a really cool idea for, it made me think of this when Golda Cat said, of talking about the idea of like adding it to things like, what the thing that inspires you and drives you could change and develop as a person. And when you play Tsui, these keys change and develop as your character. Now, by the way, you don't have to buy off. Your character could just be greedy forever and just get the experience points. But it's sort of like if there's a moment out there, how many keys are out there and can you run out and end up with no eligible keys? I don't think so. You know what, Nutrimancer? Maybe if there is a limited amount and you've run out of keys, maybe that's your sign that your character is ready to retire. They no longer have the motivation to keep going. They just want to, retire to a small farm, raise a family, and call it quits. Hang up the sword, hang up the shield, and just kind of call it a day. So I really think this is really interesting. But yeah. So you were familiar with this. Okay. And you ripped it from your system. Yeah. Interesting. That's very cool. So one of the problems I have with this resource is in Forbidden Lands, willpower is capped at 10. And I've tried to figure out online, like how much willpower people get. Because the thing is, if you push a roll, you get 1 willpower for every bane that you roll. So it's possible to gain 0, but it's also possible to gain 1 or 2 or even 3 willpower on a single die roll. Now, of course, you have to be making dice rolls. You have to be failing them or at least be put into a position where you can push. Then you have to push and roll 1s and 2s. Ones. So, my guess or my feeling is that people probably, but you need willpower. You do need willpower to play the game. And I feel like a lot of people have said that people are gaining 3 to 5 willpower per session, which feels probably a little bit right. I honestly think my group would be a little bit higher. I think they'd probably be more in the 4 to 6 range, just because I feel like they're going to push more often. Because pushing is like, wait, so you mean I failed, but I get a second chance at success, and I gain a willpower point, which will let me do all my cool, fun abilities or cast spells. Yeah, I'm going to push, So, you get 5 willpower, but remember, that's per session. So over the course of, a couple sessions, you might gain, +5, and then you spend 4, and then, the next session you gain +6, and then you spend, maybe you spend all 6, and then, so you're going to be kind of going back and forth and back and forth. It's going to be a currency. It might build up. It might drop down. But the problem is in Forbidden Lands, if you give something a D12 resource die, like food or water, this is true for food and water and torches and willpower, that roughly equivalates. Remember, D12 decays into a D10, decays into a D8, decays into a D6, decays into nothing. And the average number of rolls that it takes in order for a die to decay is 6, 5, 4, and 3. Now, if these are averages, it's going to be a bell curve, okay? That the average is going to be that it's going to take 18 rolls, okay? 6 plus 5 plus 4 plus 3. equals 18 before you go from D12 all the way down to 0. Now, again, I've done the math and I've built this bell curve. I will say that the first standard deviation of this, which is to say, roughly 65% of outcomes, is going to be between 14 and 22. So you could be roughly sure that you're going to be somewhere in that range with a D12. This is true for your food. This is true for your water. But that means if I'm using willpower, that you're going to be getting on average, it's still a lot of willpower that potentially the party could have access to. And that is a lot. And so I'm really worried that this is too high of a number. And that is why again, remember, normally you might only have 3 or 4 or 5. If you start with D10 or D12 willpower, you've got a lot of willpower. But the idea is you have to make it last, right, over the course of many, many days of potentially adventuring before you get back to a place where you could truly restore your willpower. Think back to my example from Dungeon Time Extreme, right, where you had the town, the journey, the camp, the adventure, and then there's this cycle between the camp and the adventure. I'm imagining that this similar behavior is going to occur. That is why my idea is that the players, they don't spend willpower anymore. When they would use a willpower, they simply roll the die that it is set at. So if I want to spend a willpower, I roll a D12, I roll a 1 or a 2, it goes down, otherwise it doesn't go anywhere. But if you do that, they are going to have on average 18 willpower, which is, again, is a lot, which is why part of my proposal is that pushing costs we'll call it a willpower roll. It's not guaranteed to cost you a willpower. But for me, pushing is a great thing because pushing allows, that's what every character wants in an RPG, a reroll, right? And yeah, I get it. It has consequences. You could take some attribute damage, right? But remember, when you break, I'm considering adding conditions that make it not as horrible and dangerous. AKA, if you push yourself and break because you were picking locks, you're not going to collapse unconscious for 12 hours. So that means that the pushing costs are a little bit less, which means that the push is kind of really appealing. So for me, in the standard Forbidden Lands game, it's like pushing gives you a willpower and it gives you a chance at success. It's like really good. It's like too good. It's very tempting. Now pushing becomes a little bit more nuanced because it's going to cost you a willpower roll. It might not cost you anything if you roll a 3 or higher, but it could cost you your willpower, which isn't the end of the world. But as time goes on, if a character is out in the wilderness for days at a time, and they're constantly pushing and pushing and pushing themselves to the limit, don't you think their willpower is going to run out? I think it is. And I think that just like me on that mountain, on that trail, like all those other people who left the Appalachian Trail, not because their feet were broken or anything like that, it's because their willpower ran out. Nutrimancer, thanks for stopping by and taking a stop. So I have fun with the not game design. This is not game design because I'm not trying to create an experience that is holistic. I am trying to specifically address one issue that I have with my play group and the way that I know that they're going to interact with this game. So I guess the question is, for people in chat who might know this game or might not know this game, what am I missing here? Where is this going to bite me in the ass, right? Where is this going to, where is this thing going to be a problem, basically? Because and there's one example that we've already talked about, and I do need a solution to this. There exists some talents that let you spend multiple willpower at once. Now, to be fair, there is nothing in the game, like somebody on Reddit was giving this example, and like a lot of people were like, well, that's crazy. And he's like, wait, and a lot of people were like, wait, why is that crazy? Like, that seems totally reasonable. Their character had 7 willpower, and they had a talent that lets them convert willpower into +1 damage. And so they spent 7 willpower and they added +7 damage to one of their attacks. Right? And so, that's a big change, but in the current system of the game, it's very easy to track this because all you need to do is say, oh, I've got 5 willpower. I can spend 5 willpower, or I can spend 3, or I can spend 4, I can spend 2. But when you have the dice, it's a little bit more complicated. Obviously, I don't want someone to say, I'm going to spend 18, because you don't have 18. You have the dice roll. And obviously also somebody could, drop to 0, yeah, exactly. If you thought willpower was exploitable before, well, the key here is willpower was exploitable to gain. Now I am only concerned about whether willpower, how to mechanicize without it being a pain in the ass. How do you spend multiple willpower when willpower is a die? Now, the answer is very simple. You roll the die multiple times. That is what, for example, if you shot 5 arrows, guess what you would do? You would roll your arrow resource die 5 times. That's how the game works. So, that is the simplest and easiest explanation. But I still feel like that could potentially be exploitable in this situation. And so I am a little bit worried with that. So one idea is you could roll the willpower check with disadvantage. By the way, Sean, love this idea. You know me. I love, rolling the arrow after a scene is from the Black Hack. In Forbidden Lands, every arrow you shoot, every torch you use, every food you eat, every water you drink is a resource die roll. So yes, you roll it every time you shoot. Effectively, what you could think of is, you pick up the die and you roll, and you add a D8, or whatever your resource die is. Dr. Waite says, here's the issue. You're not intended to roll so often. I completely agree. They're only supposed to re-roll if it's, but here's the problem, Dr. Waits. I agree. You're not supposed to roll so often, but guess what? The game makes you roll a lot. If you're traveling overland, you are going to be making at least 3 to 4 checks a day. Assuming that someone's pathfinding, they're going to be making a scouting roll. Someone goes foraging, someone goes fishing, someone repairs something in camp, etc., etc., etc. Those are all die rolls. Those are not hand wave. Those are not things. That's per day of travel. So, you might go, okay, well, this adventure site is 3 days away. So we're going to do 3 days of travel on the overland map. Hex, 2 hexes, 2 hexes, 2 hexes. And each day that you set camp, you're like, oh, someone's going to do this. Someone's going to do this. Someone's got to pathfind. Someone's got to lead the way. Someone's got to keep watch. Those are all die rolls in the game. So players are going to be making a lot of rolls. So I thought that I do think that I agree with you, but the game actually, I think, has you roll the dice more than you might think that it does. And then you say you're only supposed to re-roll if it's a good reason, right? Well, that is where things get a little bit, depends on how you want to describe it. But the risk, or should say, the restriction here is, it says, how a push roll plays out in story terms depends on what kind of action you're performing. It doesn't have to be physical effort. It might be about complete mental focus or an emotional struggle. But according to the game, it's if you are desperate to succeed with a skill roll, you can choose to push it. So it's the only thing is you can only push. You are only allowed to push rolls. You can only push rolls if you fail. And you can only push a roll if you succeed, if rolling additional successes will increase the effect of the roll. But again, that is the game saying as it's saying. And And you are correct. It does say here, there's a little sidebar here. It says, in Forbidden Lands, a dice roll is a dramatic moment. Pushing rolls can give you damage, but also willpower point. Rolling dice too often slows the game down and could generate an excess of willpower points. Thus, you should only roll dice when absolutely necessary in dramatic situations. Great, completely agree. But the game makes you make dice rolls to go fishing. The game makes you make a dice roll to forage herbs and vegetables from the ground. The game makes you make a dice roll to lead the way or find the path to every single hex in the game. Now, I don't necessarily know that those are super dramatic, but they are a die roll, and you could fail it. So this is where I'm like, there's sort of the game is saying one thing, but it's kind of writing a different thing. So yes, casting spells would be tricky because in you can spend multiple willpowers. Some require multiple willpowers just to cast. If you were rolling unsure if you'd have enough to cast, it could get weird. I completely agree. Now, roll the willpower die, -0, -1, -2. Hardrick, I really like that roll. I really think that that's good. You can roll multiple times, but you have to stop if your die degrades. I like that as well. So I think that's a really that's a really interesting idea. I kind of like that. In fact, what I kind of like even better, because remember, I'm worried that the D12 is too much willpower. What I might do, Hardrick, is remember, I want to be able to use this willpower as a GM consequence. Okay. Which means if a player, fails a roll, or if a player, something happens in the fiction as a consequence, it's something that I might say to the player is I might say, roll your resource die, roll your willpower die to see if this drained your willpower. And that would be normal, where a 1 or a 2 would make the willpower decay to a D10. And that's because I'm the one driving it. Right. And what I might say is that when you push, okay, you roll the willpower die, and on a 1 or a 2, it decays. But if you spend willpower, you roll the willpower die with a -1 for each willpower spent. So unlike your situation where it was -0, -1, I want, it's a little bit easier to just say 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3. But remember, my concern here is that I'm giving them too much willpower. So I do want their willpower to decay. So if a character comes in and spends 1 willpower, they would roll their resource die, their willpower die, I should say. Like, let's say they're rolling a D10. Normally, that would decay on a 1 or 2, but they're spending 1 willpower, so now it decays on a 1, 2, or a 3. If they were spending 2 willpower, it would be a 1, a 2, or a 3, or a 4. And then I think that there should be some max that you're able to spend. I don't know what that number should be, but, Sean, I like that. Could cap what willpower to D10, and only something extraordinary takes it up to a D12. I like that idea. I do like that idea. That's really good. Alia says, I finally had it figured out. Now I've immediately slipped back into it. Alia says, I hear you aren't supposed to roll thing a lot, but as Derek said, a lot of the rolls happen just by following the procedure in the book. And Dr. Waits, to be very clear, I'm not worried about willpower farming either. In the rules as written, not worried about it. My group is a good group of guys. They're not going to do stupid shit just to try to farm willpower. I'm just saying, so I don't actually have a problem with that in the game, like, at all. I don't think that is an issue. My issue is not about the farming, It's more about the fiction. Oh, Shadram. It's less about the farming and more about the fiction. Heart. Gaining willpower when you fail just doesn't feel right. Or when you're repairing your pants, Clearly, this all needs playtesting. KLC community game when? Well, the thing about a Golden Cat actually is I want to do a Forbidden Lands KLC community game, a West Marches with the whole Discord. using your tickets to get in. But I would probably just use completely rules as written because I'm going to be using the Foundry module and I don't want to change anything in there just to make it fit my weird settings. Also, remember, these settings I don't think are necessary for the game. They are for my personal game with my precise group of people that I've been playing with for 25 years. And I know how they act and I know what they're going to want to do. And I know that some of these rules interactions are going to rub me and them and us the wrong way. So I wouldn't even want to use them in a broader game. Bailiff says, damn, I missed it. So, right. I spend 10 and I take the D grade without a roll. Exactly. There's got to be some sort of practical cap. Peter, I like that. You could limit it to half the die. So like if you have a D10, the most that you could spend is 5. If you have a D8, the most you could spend is 4. I do like that. It's very simple. It's easy. I think people understand that fundamentally. So I think that's pretty good. That's not a bad idea. But I want it to be simple and I want it to be quick, I also like the idea of advantage and disadvantage. I like that idea even for regular resource dice, particularly. Like what if a character is like eating, right? You have to eat food. But what if a character goes like, I'm going to cut back to minimal rations? I don't care if there's a consequence. You go, yeah, okay, you're going to be, fatigued. It's like, okay, roll your resource die for food, but roll it with advantage, because you're trying to preserve resources. But there's a cost. You're going to suffer some other point of damage, but you won't become hungry, but your resources, maybe can stretch a little further or something like that, Dr. Waits, I think that they offer an explanation for Forbidden Lands as to why you get more, determined the more you lose. The problem, Dr. Waits, is you also become more determined when you win, because if you push a roll and you suffer some attribute damage, you will gain willpower. But it doesn't matter whether you fail or succeed at that roll. You gain the willpower just for pushing. That's where I suffer the disconnect. Actually, I would like it a little bit better, Dr. Waits, if it said, if you push a roll and still fail, then any ones that you rolled which caused ability or attribute damage give you 1 point of willpower per. That at least feels more internally consistent to me. So I think that makes a little bit more sense. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you all is, I like the idea of, we have this willpower concept. And as I said before, I finally took a look. I haven't gone through it at all, but one of the first things I saw when I looked at Forbidden Lands Reforged, Power Reforged, whatever it's called, is this idea of the Hygiene resource, which I think is awesome. Because it gets to the whole idea of your characters are tromping through the wilderness. What would that do? What would that draw? So my question is, there are currently 4 tangible resources: food, water, arrows, torches. I really like the idea of there being the 4 intangible resources. And in case you didn't see it on the stream, I have built this little, it's like a little player aid, okay, that'll allow the players to have a spot. It's like a little holder, and there's a spot for their food die, and there's a spot for their water die, and there's a spot for their arrows die, and they will have a physical D12 or D8 or D10 that they will basically put into that little cubby to keep it there safe, so it doesn't get lost in all the other dice that are rolling around the table, and then go from there. So obviously we will say, okay, one of our intangible resources is willpower. We also might even consider using the Hygiene one from Reforged Power, but I'd like for there to be 3 other intangible resources that make thematic sense for the kind of story and fiction and tone and genre, right, that may exist in the Forbidden Lands. Now, Golden Cat comes out with vibes. which is pretty sus. But faith is a good one. Now, I think that is actually a really cool idea. And I could really see that I don't know how I would incorporate that into the game, but there's obviously religion in this game. And obviously faith can be a huge source of intangible, right? These are resources, people. This is something that you can call upon in order to get things done, and a lot of people do, vibes, mojo, but I'm trying to be a little bit more serious than that. But I think faith is really important. I mean, how many people do you know in your life who, are able to use their faith as a resource to overcome hardship, to get through tough times, to, see their way through? You could easily imagine a character with a lot of faith, okay, in a moment of desperation when the dragon attacks, that being the resource, Ooh, Amaya, I don't think you're off the mark at all. Could reputation be one of the intangible resources? I think it could. I really do think it could. I don't remember. This is, again, it's a new system for me. I don't really remember the reputation rules that well. Anybody know what page they're on? Let me take a look. Reputation. Page 40. Okay, here we go. 40. Okay, your adventure reputation. This is represented by your reputation score, which will determine your chance of being recognized in social conflicts. Your reputation score only tells you how well known you are, not if you're feared or admired. And then they roll a number of D6 equal to your reputation score. If you roll one or more sixes, your reputation precedes you. I do kind of like this idea. I don't know that it particularly works. Now, you need a way to spend rep. I could absolutely see someone spending rep, right? If you go into a town, you could roll your rep die, right? To see if you can use your reputation to get something that you need or want, right? I don't know. I'm just thinking outside the box here. And maybe I don't know, maybe on a 6 or higher, you get it. I don't know. I'm just trying to think how you could spend your rep. But if you roll a 1 or a 2, you push too hard, and then they don't have anything for you, but also they're kind of like, she's not as cool as we thought she was. And the reputation could come that you're just looking for handouts, So I think reputation's pretty good. I think that's actually a pretty cool idea. And I think also too, right? What do I always say? What gets measured gets managed. What gets rewarded gets repeated. And so if you're measuring these things, and the game, to be clear, is already measuring reputation. Now, I don't necessarily know that we need to replace this, but reputation is an intangible, and it's already something the game cares about, and potentially it could be a really good option. But let's just keep the wheels moving, because these are all really good ideas. David was thinking the same thing. Relationships could be one. Not sure how well do we interact, representing power dynamics. Here's the thing, Goldacat. I completely agree with you, but I don't think that is the style and tone that I want to go to for Forbidden Lands. That to me is more of like kind of an Avatar thing, So, Mr. Chase Holloway throwing his support to the adventure, coming in with a sponsorship. Thank you for that. That is extremely, extremely generous. I would like to thank you for your kindness and for your generosity. That is very nice of you. Look at that. But yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Look at that. Rocking that nice loyalty badge. Very cool. Very cool. Chase, thank you so much for that support. Really appreciate it. I was not expecting to get any tips or support. So, the couple that I've gotten have been really nice. That's been really cool. But yeah, so heart, relationships, I think that stuff's really important for a game like Fabula Ultima, right? Which is all about the power our friendship and we're coming together. Or like Avatar, where it's like, we need to learn to work together as a team, you know? So yeah. But would including faith as a resource penalize character concepts built around having lost faith or simply not having a lot of faith? Yes. But also, Peter, I think, having high faith could also be a drawback as well, right? It could come with a, price and thing. The other thing, Peter, is realistically, this game isn't about balance, right? It's about playing the character and expressing that character the mechanical way. And so I'm not as concerned about penalizing a character concept. If somebody wants to have low faith, they have low faith and I think that that's okay. It's not a resource that they can rely upon, and when we say faith, I assume we're, Forbidden Lands has a pantheon of deities. And so we're assuming it's faith in, those godly powers, now, Golden Cat says willpower is your grit to persevere, but it can also be, could you keep your morale up? Not just courage, but good humor in the face of adversity. Now, I will fully admit, I love the idea for like monsters or for, NPCs that the party fights, or maybe even hirelings or retainers that they have. You could have morale as a resource die. You could have, if they're like a hireling, you could have loyalty as a resource die, right? And every time the party gets into danger, you roll that loyalty die to see, hey, is the loyalty of this retainer, persevering? But I don't think that those are as appropriate for PCs. I mean, we could get to a world where the PC loses their morale and you force them to flee, but the game already kind of handles that through wits damage. So I'm not as worried, and that only happens from fear attacks, ideally. So again, you could take wits damage from pushing, but that's one of the reasons why I want to change what happens when you break on your wits. Trust is good. I like trust. Willpower, reputation, faith, morale. It's not bad. It sounds pretty great. I worry that there's an overlap between willpower and morale there, Ooh. Now, I do like cephalopod here. I just saw that pop at the bottom. I do want to go back to what everybody else says. What about something like a focus or awareness? I kind of like that. I do kind of like that. I am trying to specifically avoid morality, David. That is a conscious choice. I do want to just kind of avoid morality as a resource. Okay, instead of a usage die, what if willpower was a D6 pool like reputation? But instead of caring about sixes, you only look for ones, and for every one, reduce your willpower. It's a resource, and I kind of like using it as a resource, like as such, and all the other resources use resource dice. So I like the commonality of mechanic there. As written in the book, you don't spend reputation. So the fact that it's just a score that goes up and down, reputation is more like an attribute or a skill, right, than it is a resource in the book as written. The same way that if you have a strength of 4, you roll 4 dice and you're looking for a 6. If you have a strength of 6, you're rolling 6 dice and you're looking for a 6 on the dice. Reputation works the same way. So reputation is more like an attribute than a resource as written in the book. So now if we change that, that's something different. But I don't think that that's a horrible idea, but because that is how reputation works. But what does Tundla got for us? Since Forbidden Lands is about venturing in untamed wilds, what about a stat that represents your connection to civilization? The thing that fades away when you get weird and alienated in the wilderness. Now, Tundalus, I actually like this a little bit because Torchbearer does this, okay, in Torchbearer. And for those of you who don't know Torchbearer, in Torchbearer, you have a score called Nature. And it's a very powerful resource. It is sort of like your essential being. Like if you are a human, it is your human nature. If you're an elf, it is your elf nature. And it can range from 0 to 7. And it's a very powerful resource. But when your nature gets high, okay, if it ends the session at 7 and you don't reduce it by the end of the session, your character retires. And the reason is because they are so much of a human, they don't want to adventure anymore. They want to, start a family and found a lineage and open up a business, okay? If you're elf, you, I don't know, sail into the west to the undying lands and join your kin in eternal peace. You've become so elf-like, you have to retire. But if your nature gets too low to 0 and you end the session at 0 nature, you also retire. And why might you retire? Because you're basically, as you said, you're a weirdo. you're a crazy hermit, that lives on the outskirts of civilization. You just become this outcast weirdo. You've broken completely with your race, your people, your civilization, and you're just kind of a nutso. So I do like that. I think that actually is really, really cool. But yeah, Torchbearer uses the same concept. Exactly. Sean says, oh snap, Tundalus, the creator of Trespasser, is here. Tundalus, I did not know that you are the creator of Trespasser. Tundalus, are you the creator of Trespasser? That'd be cool. I think Trespasser is awesome. It is on my short list of things to cover on the channel. Yeah, Pumpkin's saying the same thing. That's awesome. But anyways, let us know. Referring to SAO abridged for my thoughts on the power of love and friendship. Just saying. Exactly. That's awesome. I like loyalty dice on hirelings stolen. Yeah, I really like that too. And by the way, Goldicat, there's sort of an overlay to that to Root, right? Because in Root, the PCs have the injury resource. They have the fatigue, exhaustion resource, and they have the depletion resource. NPCs have the same thing, but the NPCs also have a morale resource, because it's an idea of, should morale be on the PCs? Yes or no? I don't know. I like those kind of social mechanics that can force the player to do things. So I don't dislike that idea. But generally you'll get increases to these resources as a reward of some sort. That'll be a bit odd if you don't want the character to have a lot of that resource. Well, Peter, I think it's just a, it's an ebb and a flow. It also depends on what the resource does. If it's empty, remember, having food doesn't do anything for you, right? Not having food is the problem, because when you don't have food, then you become hungry. So some of these resources, the intangible ones, could simply be, if you have it, great. If it runs out, something bad happens to you, right? But I do agree that morale and willpower seem pretty similar, which is a little bit of a concern for mine. I'm thinking morale is more maintaining good attitude and humor versus willpower, keeping moving forward. But as Derek said, wits kind of covers what morale is coming for. Yeah. I go to my human home and I do my human things. Exactly. No promotion necessary. Laughing my ass off, embarrassed. Oh, Tundalus, that's awesome. That is an awesome book that you put together. I really liked it. Smith really liked it. And I haven't gone through like every single page of it, but I really thought some of the ideas around it's kind of like it's like an OSR 4E game. It's really, really cool. Very cool. Not a promotion, but check out Trespasser. I believe it is on itch.io. Trespasser. Let's take a look here. Yeah, it is. You know what? It is name your own price. So if you want to throw, $10 or $5, it doesn't have to cost you, it doesn't have to cost you a ton of money. But it's awesome. It's awesome. Tundalus, you should be very proud. It's a very cool game. So Tundalus, you should be happy. I think you might have seen the poll. Tomorrow we're covering Strike, which I have to assume was at least part of your research or part of your inspiration, right? So, but yeah, awesome. We are doing it. tomorrow. Listen, I don't want to put him out. I don't want to put him out, but yeah, Strike is fantastic. I love Strike. I've always loved Strike. I've had it for, God, I don't even know how many millions of years. It feels like probably over a decade now. It feels like, I don't know. And it's a shame that he never got, I know that he had some family medical issues or something like that. I don't think he ever got a chance to really go back and give it the kind of full treatment that he wanted to. So I'm a big fan of Strike. I think it's really great. So we're talking about that tomorrow. Yeah, a lot of depends on the details. I'm just wary that some labels might imply more about the character than others. And I like the general idea, but I would handle with care. Yeah, I agree. I do think it's something that needs to be handled with care. What do we think about this idea? I mean, I know it sounds kind of silly, but what do we think of this idea of hygiene as a resource? Do we like that one? And because I'm trying to think here, like, so you're out in the wilderness, right? What are the things that, and again, also I want them to be, tools that I want them to be things that I can kind of attack, I like, without it being like horrible. Like, I like hygiene because it's one of those things that doesn't really matter in the town. Or so it doesn't matter in the wilderness, but it'll matter in the town or a castle. And I really like that. And also, I'm just being completely honest with you here. I also love the idea. I know this sounds stupid, but I love the idea that a character gets into town and now there's a reason for them to spend their money on going to the bathhouse. There's a reason why their character might want to buy new clothes, right? There's a reason why living like a crazy homeless person in the wilderness can have negative social consequences. And if, you just don't care about your appearance and stuff, that doesn't matter when you're just, slaying dragons and orcs and undead. But when you get to a town or a castle and you're asking to be let in, if you let your shit go, it's pretty bad. At the same time, this is the Ryutama, by the way, influence. I know. Yes. Ryutama influence. I love the idea of your character being like, imagine a scene where the characters find this, this beautiful spring crystal clear pool, right? And everybody decides, you know what, it's worth it. Let's just all go, for a refreshing dip in the pool, right? You might be like, man, that restores willpower. That restores hygiene. This was a great moment for you guys. It's not treasure. It's not killing a monster. But I'm telling you that by giving that a mechanical reward, the players will feel, and I'm saying this from experience, not from Forbidden Lands experience. I'm talking about this from other game experiences. The players will be like, that was awesome. Like, what a cool find. What a cool experience. It's such a fun little moment in the game. So yeah, and agreed. It does not have to be an FBT bathhouse session. You don't have to play out, oh, he brings the soap, he brings the other thing. It's more of like a procedural moment that gives that experience mechanical weight that I think really drives home the importance of it, that I think is good. So, oh, good point, Peter. Hygiene could matter for random encounters. Absolutely. Oh, like if it's like a creature that tracks by scent and stuff. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, hygiene seems good in the Reforged Power book and the way it'll affect you. So I think it's good. And I think, Kyle, I think it does in the Reforged Power book where he introduced hygiene. I think it does affect your social interactions. So yeah. Diseases, infection, perfect for wilderness person. I just think hygiene is not the right word. I think hygiene's okay. I think it could be, it could be, I don't know, cleanliness or something. I don't want it to be too wordy, Hygiene's not bad, but it could be something like hygiene, cleanliness, something. I might chat GBT it. The problem is, Amaya, filth. The idea is you want the resource die to be high, right? So if it's filth, it's a little bit weird because then it's like, it sounds weird to have the die be high. Like what I would rather have is you have just like Food. You have food. It goes down. It goes to 0. Your character gains a condition. That condition, hungry. You have hygiene. It goes down. When it gets to 0, your character gains a condition. Filthy. Right? And that's the way I would kind of run it. Again, to keep it in line with the other mechanics that are in the game. All right, what does Pumpkin's got? Willpower, reputation, faith, and nature would be my choices. I think from what I've seen so far, focus is pretty good too. I do like the idea of focus. So I think I like the idea of the reputation. I do like that. But I'm curious, I don't think I'm as concerned about the nature in this game, and I'll tell you why. Because the kin already all have a unique kin talent that I think does a good job of, and again, I'm getting off base here because it's a torchbearer thing. But the way that you use nature in torchbearer is what's called stock. It's called your stock in torchbearer. What am I doing here? I got the PDF. Come on. Maybe I do. Here we go. Okay. Torchbearer. Okay, this should be torchbearer. Cool. Here we go. So in torchbearer, your stock, your race, I guess you would call it, each different, this is a human, okay? And you can see that her nature is 4 out of 4 because it could get destroyed. But all humans have the same 3 nature descriptors: boasting, demanding, and running. Whereas like an elf is like singing, remembering, and don't remember what it is. I don't remember what the elves are. Oh, but like the dwarves are like, grudges and something like that. So basically, I don't know where it is in the book, but basically you use your nature in that game to be like a way to kind of showcase what your kin and what your race is all about. You already kind of do that in Forbidden Lands because your kin talent shows off how unique your race is, right? If you're a human, you're adaptable. If you're a dwarf, you've got that grit. If you're an elf, you can enter that trance. So it's kind of a moment to say, hey, look, I'm an elf and it matters. It's not just +2 to my dex and low light vision, right? It's kind of reminds me of 4th edition, right? Where an Eladrin can fucking teleport from level 1. It feels powerful and weird. A Dragonborn can breathe a gout of fire. You're not going to forget that the fighter or the ranger is a Dragonborn when they're breathing fire every encounter. You're not going to forget that the wizard or the rogue or the warlord is an Eladrin when they are teleporting around the battlefield every encounter. And I think that's why those kind of kin talents in nature exist. So I don't think we necessarily need nature. That being said, I do like the idea of focus. I don't know what it means and how it works, but I do like the idea of it. Does this get too close to the idea of wits damage? I'm a little bit concerned there. Because we do have strength, we do have agility, we do have those things. Those things can take damage. It's just a little bit, I don't know if it's a resource. I mean, obviously focus is a resource, right? People talk attention, right? Attention span, right? So it is kind of an interesting situation. But yeah. What's funny about this is one of my players likes to roll around in the mud as a dark secret, which a hygiene mechanic could compete with in a fun way. Absolutely. And by the way, Alia, god damn it. The thing that I really, really like about that is a character's like, well, I want to get that experience point for my dark secret. So I'm going to have to take an action that potentially could have a game consequence. It's not just, oh, lols, he likes to roll around the mud. Now it has a matter, and I like that a lot. Casey says, yeah, I love hygiene as a mechanic. Rewarding things that feel like they should matter to someone returning for a few weeks from the wilderness feels right. And I think that's again, I have a couple of biases into this game. One of them is I spent a number of months essentially living like a homeless person in the woods. And it's kind of cool for me to be able to share that experience with my friends through a game. And let me tell you something. When I would get back to a town and I might get a motel for a night or a hostel or even a bed and breakfast, getting clean, like everybody, when they would hit town, you're looking for a shower. You're looking for a laundromat, just the ability to dry out all of your clothes, to get to hose off your boots, right? To wash your socks. I mean, it was just like, it was such a relief. You felt like a human again. It was remarkably crazy how much. And I think anybody who spent time in the wilderness like that, whether you're, in the army or you're hiking or anything like that, I think that really comes through. Penalty to manipulate, can't help or be helped by others. Oh, I like that idea. If you're filthy, risk of disease when getting injured. Perfect. I think, I assuming Shadram, that's what it does in RP, which is perfect. That's awesome. Right. Yep, exactly. Hygiene works. Okay. It's not just brushing your teeth. It's, making sure that you don't get infected, that that you're keeping ticks off. Right. Enthusiasm. Okay. You need to make a drinking game of every time I say Elia wrong. Sorry. I will try not to. Every time you say it wrong, I'll give you a hero point. I think that people skills is definitely part of the manipulation. So I like this idea. I like this idea a lot. And I know, like, a lot of you might be thinking, Derek, isn't this a lot of resources? Yeah. But to me, this is what the game is about. To me and my friends, like, this is a game about exploring the wilderness. It's not about killing monsters and kicking ass and taking names. If we wanted to do that, we'd be playing 4th edition D&D. We don't want to do that. I mean, we do want to do that, but that's not what we're going to do this time. And we just got done playing Pathfinder 2. So in Pathfinder 2, I don't need to tell most of you about this. You don't got to track shit. Resources barely matter at all. So for me, this is definitely counter-purposed, but I like the ability for me as a game master to have, multiple ways. And again, if you watched Quest for the Frozen Flame, you'll know that I was really inspired by the Battlestar Galactica board game. Okay. When I built that. Okay. And for those of you who do not know the Battlestar Galactica board game, it is amazing. I feel bad for anybody, sadly, who did not play or did not play the game or watch the show, because if you watch the show and then you had a chance to play the game, it is amazing, because it is so fun, because it feels just like you are, playing. It represents the game so well. It does such an amazing job. So in Battlestar Galactica board game, you have 3 resources, which are really hard to read here: fuel, food, morale, and population. How many people are in the fleet? How many people are left? What is the morale of the fleet of ragtag human survivors fleeing the mechanical Cylon menace? How much food do you have, food and water, to keep the people alive? And how much fuel do you have to continue your journey to find Cobalt or New Caprica? Guess what? If any of these reach 0, the humans lose the game. But a big part of this game is trading resources one for another, right? And like one of my favorite cards in this game is, it's called like water shortages, and it's an event card that comes up, and it basically says the president decides, right? And again, this is what I love, game mechanics that imply fiction. Okay, you tell me what this means. The card is called water shortages, and it shows like a picture from the scene, and it shows people like, running out of water. And then it says the president chooses either -3 food or -1 food, -2 morale. And that's all it says. There's no description. There's no text. You either can have -3 food or you can have -1 food and -2 morale. And so that mechanic implies something. It implies something about the fiction of the game. It implies something about the choice that the president is making. But also it implies of what's the state of your board? What's the state of your resources? What do you have a lot of? What do you not have a lot of? What can you afford to spend? What can't you afford to lose? And I like that kind of style to the game. And I think it's really interesting in that way. So all right. Correct. They are eating fellow humans, reducing morale. Okay, a man may apparently. I had a hard time trying to get into Battlestar. It's a damn shame. I love it, but I'll say it. Decorum could encompass both the hygiene and social graces aspect of the wilderness. Good point, but I don't see that as something that you would be necessarily losing or gaining through the kind of actions that we're sort of dealing with in the game. I'm not really worried about your social graces, although your social graces could be depleted, I suppose. It's not completely, unbelievable. I really want to focus though on things that we can easily think of as like a percentage, a gauge, something that you can gain and lose, right? Like in a very concrete way. Shadram, in many cases, the resources aren't necessarily about gaining a benefit. Food, water, arrows don't do anything for you except let you eat, which lets you avoid the hungry condition. Drink, which lets you avoid the thirsty condition. Arrows gives you the ability to shoot. When you run out of arrows, you can't shoot. Torches give you the ability to see when it's dark. You run out of torches, you can't see when it's dark. So like food and water are basically just there to avoid you getting the hungry and thirsty condition. So some of the conditions might just be like hygiene might just be you avoid getting the filthy condition. And when you run out of hygiene, you are filthy. And that has some game effects just like hungry and thirsty does. And while hungry and thirsty can kill your character, hygiene might not, or being filthy might not, be something that'll kill you, but it could have lasting mechanical consequences. And to get cured of your filthy condition, you would have to take significant steps in the fiction: time, money, resources, access to something that could legitimately get you clean before you could cure that filthy condition. And you have to eat to avoid hunger. So it's like basically the same thing as hygiene. Correct. Yes. Now the difference is willpower is a resource. It's just also a currency. And in that way, it's kind of like arrows, right? Willpower is going to kind of be kind of both, right? Because arrows and torches can be depleted, but you can also use them to gain a game effect. I can shoot somebody from far away. I can see where it is dark. So that's kind of where the give and take is, if that makes any sense. So what happens in your game when you hit 0 hygiene? Filthy. When you hit 0 willpower? Great question. It could be nothing, because the effect of having 0 willpower is you can't push anymore. Remember, you have to roll a resource die to push in my model. So if you run out of willpower, your character can't push anymore. They can't activate any of their talents, and they can't cast spells. So all of those things are bad news bears. If you get to 0 reputation, I don't think there's necessarily a penalty. I think it's just that you're completely unknown and no one will recognize you, Willpower is a resource, but it's also a currency. It's kind of like arrows was the most YouTube TTRPG content creator sentence and tone I've ever heard on this channel. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Are you saying I'm on the up and up, or are you saying I'm being kind of facetious? So the truth of the matter is, I'm going to try this stuff out. I don't know if it's going to succeed. I have every confidence that Forbidden Land is a fantastically designed game, but I would be, lying to you if I told you that it is, it has all the tools and levers that I need to play the kind of game that I want to play with my friends. It doesn't. But it has, but you notice that the things I'm coming up with, I'm not stealing them from other games. I'm simply using the mechanics that this game already gives me, which are awesome. I'm just expanding them in scope. I'm adding a little bit more complexity in the hopes that I am making the game more interesting and hopefully for my group of people, more fun. Because obviously, if someone doesn't want to, if you're like, the idea of tracking my fucking hygiene, let alone my fucking arrows, feels like horrible, that's totally valid. Just don't play this game. If tracking torches and arrows is not your cup of tea, you're definitely not going to want to track hygiene. But I like it because in this game, being dirty matters, and it might be something that comes up. So I think I like the idea of willpower, hygiene, reputation. I just want one more. I like the idea of focus, although I'm not exactly sure if that doesn't kind of, dip into, wits a little bit. So I do like the idea of focus, but I'm not sure what I want it to be or how I want it to be. And what that would mean for running out of it, Peter says purpose. I think purpose is also part of willpower. Someone with a high amount of willpower, they're going to be able to, push on, drive on, do that kind of thing, I think. Derek, I know it won't happen, but I desperately want you to design a game from scratch. It will not happen. I think anybody who designs a game, I can't. The reason I can't design a game is because of what you see here going on here tonight. I am always going to be like, I'm going to always devil's advocate myself. I'm always going to be like, oh, this is a great idea. But yeah, but that mechanic doesn't work. You should choose this different idea again. And also I'm really bad at writing. I'm not a writer. That's why I don't do scripted videos, because it would literally take me longer than a 3-hour live stream to write a 15-minute script. I'm not a writer. I really like the keys idea for earning willpower. I will talk to my players about that. Not sure we'll want the extra complexity of willpower as a die or extra resources, at least first. Shadram, I actually think that the straight idea of keys works better if you're just using willpower as individual resources. Hell, you could use the scale that Tasoy uses, right? Of 1, 2, 5, 10 if you buy off. So like if a character has that big breakthrough moment and they achieve the buy off, you're like, boom, max out your willpower all the way to 10. Like, that's a cool moment. And it's a big moment. Like when, the character has the big breakthrough, their willpower refills in the middle of a situation and, maybe a dangerous situation. And they're able to spend all that willpower and do something amazing. That's a really cool character moment. That'll be a really cool table moment. So I actually think that the keys idea even works better if you're just using the standard points system. So all for it. I think it's a great idea. Exactly. You got to tell Smith, I can't do it. You know what they say? You are your biggest critic. And that I'm very true with that. What about something like safety, where the longer you stay out and don't rest, the more open you are to attack? I don't know if that would clash with armor. I like the idea of that, Amaya. I like the idea of that, but I don't think that's an individual resource. I could see there being this concept of like the dungeon master of having like a party resource, right, of safety. And like maybe it's something that you track individually. It's almost like a clock in that way. These resource dice, if you think about it, they're a little bit like clocks that are just randomly ticked because you're rolling the die. So there's something to be said there. I think that's interesting. There is not a luck resource. There is a luck talent, but I would be lying to you if I told you I knew what it did. Let's see. I'm pretty sure there's a lucky. Yep, there is a lucky. Let's see what lucky does. Lucky. When you suffer a critical injury, you can re-roll once. The lowest roll counts. So it lets you re-roll against critical injuries. Wow. Rank 3 is pretty brutal. When you suffer a critical injury, you may choose your injury freely from the relevant list. Wow, that's incredibly powerful. Patience. I don't mind patience. I don't know if it fits with the exact vibe of Forbidden Lands, but I do like the idea of it. There's something there I like. We've got willpower, we've got hygiene, we've got reputation. I like the idea. I mean, morale is a cool idea, but again, I think it overlaps with willpower. And I don't want the players to have to run away because they ran out of willpower or morale. I just don't think that's right. I think that's only appropriate if it's a fear attack and the game already takes place of that with the wits roll and wits breaking because of fear. But I like the idea of some sort of intangible resource that represents a character, becoming frustrated or losing their cool, losing their patience, right? Like something along those lines, getting annoyed. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but there's something there that I like, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. Baby powder. Yes, I am definitely. I didn't. Mark Twain, I think, wrote, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long letter instead. Patience and focus, I think, are kind of in that same ballpark, I think that's true. Chase, thanks for the support, and glad you were able to catch up with this bonus book. Remember, we'll be back tomorrow, folks, with a real stream. This wasn't even a real stream. Lucky is really just the I don't die talent. That is very powerful. So prudence from Hardrick. Is that a resource though? You spend your prudence. Metal, I think, is also very similar to willpower, right? I'm going to test their metal. I'm going to test their discipline. I'm going to test their morale. I'm going to test their willpower. I think those are all kind of in the same boat, right? There's a lot that is covered by those things, right? Hygiene feels very different from willpower. Reputation feels very different from willpower. But a lot of the ideas that people are coming in kind of fall into that willpower thing. So I think there's this idea of what should the fourth one be? It doesn't have to be a fourth one. It could just be, there could be 7 resources. I have no problem with that. But there's something to be said about 4 and 4. And there's a little bit of balance and symmetry from the game mechanics to that end. And I don't hate it. So, but it is, it's 11:30. So I am going to wrap up. But thank you, everybody. I think everybody had some really cool ideas here. Hope, again, that kind of is that morale idea, I think. So for sure. Caution, again, I think caution is something that the players will be showing through the way that they act, not necessarily through a resource. Everything in Forbidden Lands is enforced. That's true. You get 4 15-minute turns per hour. You get 4 quarter days per day. You get 4 attributes. You get, so I do think 4. Is it needless symmetry? Perhaps. It could be. That's what I was saying. It has to be 4. It's literally unplayable. Unfortunate Pumpkin, there is a design consideration, which is I'm going to be making, right, a little player card. It's going to be composed of 2 layers. This is a profile view. It's composed of 2 layers of, what the hell just happened? Oh, it turned that into a triangle. It's going to be composed of 2 layers of foam core, sandwiched on top of each other, and it's going to have holes cut into it. And so when you look at it from this perspective, it'll be like there'll be a square there, and 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 a square there. And this will be a spot to put your food dye. And this will be a spot to put your water dye. And this will be a spot to put your, torch dye or whatever. And so then at the bottom, I would have 1, 2, 3, and then not a 4th. So there's kind of like a part of me that's like, well, I mean, if we're going to have this thing, we might as well have 4. I mean, it feels like that makes some amount of sense. But I mean, you're right. We don't need to make it just to make it fit. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. The question is, we have this idea of willpower. Is there something that is also that humans have? And I do think focus is actually a really good one, because that to me is a resource. I think we all understand that, right? We have focus, we can lose focus, we can gain focus. So I think there's something to be said about having focus as a resource. Additionally, when I think about some of the smaller detailed checks in the game, okay, when we think about the skills of the game, things like lore, things like scouting, things like sleight of hand, picking locks, that kind of stuff. What are some other ones? I don't even know all the skills in the game, and there's only 16 of them. Here we go. Crafting, stealth, sleight of hand, marksmanship, scouting, lore, insight, right? I could imagine all of those things causing you to potentially, if you're failing those checks, to lose focus, right? Maybe, I don't know, does that sound like something, that I think feels right? I don't know. I'll play around with it. I'll workshop it, but I kind of like that idea. So again, I think we this is exactly what I wanted from this stream, which was to just ramble incoherently. But to get feedback from you guys and, the ideas of using like reputation, and some of the willpower systems. And I liked a lot of the suggestions that I had. I'm probably going to write a Python script to write some code to simulate how much of an impact that has. But, I like the idea of the willpower depletion concepts, because again, accounting for the fact that people could spend multiple willpower at once. I will sometimes use a system of travel speed versus safety that basically reduces the number of potential encounters, but increases the severity of bad encounters when it occurs. I like it. It's a risk versus, it's like a push your luck, right? It's a risk versus reward. I like that. I like that idea a lot. So I've got willpower, hygiene, and reputation. I think those are the three that we have. But the fourth, because again, willpower is again that inner drive, motivation, determination, grit, all those things, right? That inner power. Hygiene is external. And again, it's just part of the reality of the situation that your character is going to be disgusting and gross. And it's part of what happens to you when you're in the travel. And it happened to me. And reputation is already in the system. But like willpower, it's a system of increasing dice, of increasing value. And we could just make it a die instead. And it could be something that we use in a very similar way. And a character could, a great example of this is like if the characters decide to spend the better part of a season working on their fortress and they stop adventuring and they stop making a name for themselves, maybe that reputation resource starts to dwindle, because you're not in the limelight and people forget your name, You'd make the fourth luck, even if there is a lucky talent. The problem is I don't know what I would really use it for. I mean, luck is definitely something that people talk about as a resource. That person's lucky. That person's not lucky. That person has run out of luck. That person is spending all their luck. I think it totally fits. I just don't know that it works for Forbidden Lands. I don't even necessarily know that I like the lucky talent in Forbidden Lands. I just don't think that, that is a thing for me personally. Horses, to make use of the 20 slots on the character sheet. The 20 slots on the character sheet for the horses are for the equipment that your horse is carrying, not for having 20 horses. Anyways, well, awesome. Thanks everybody for hanging out with me. I will see you tomorrow. We're going to be talking about Strike, a very interesting game that is kind of it's pretty rough around the edges in some ways, but it is a post 4E game that tried to be inspired by some of the role-playing story beat mechanics of Powered by the Apocalypse and Blaze in the Dark and stuff like that. So I think that is going to be a very interesting stream. It should be interesting. So if you're interested in 4th edition or you're just interested in a new game, come check us out tomorrow. Temperament, Samuel, like your attitude, it's not bad. I could see that. Like, are you getting grumpier? So anyways, well, thanks everybody. I thought I was only going to be on for an hour or two, but I mean, again, we didn't get on until about 9. So it's only been 2.5 hours, pretty short for us, but it was fun. Again, this stuff, I could talk about these stupid things for hours. So that's why it's always takes me forever to get through anything. Cause there's a lot of considerations and I like to really understand, what's going on. But, but like your attitude, your temperance, your temperament rather. I don't think that's a bad idea. I'd have to really think about that one. I don't think that one's a bad idea. The idea that you're getting upset. I don't know. But then again, maybe some characters are naturally upset, so it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, I don't exactly know how to account for that. The other one, which by the way we talked about, so we have willpower, hygiene, and rep. So the three that have been suggested are this idea of focus or faith or this idea of sort of attitude, or what's your temperament, temperament. I don't hate it. So there is something to be said about that. There's a little bit of narrative positioning there, because I don't necessarily know it's a resource per se, because some characters might, right? Like hygiene is going to be a spectrum. You're either clean or you're not clean, but temperament can be, something that, it's like my character's always kind of salty. Like, so what would me gaining temperament mean? There's something to be kind of finagled with that. All right. Well, I'm going to get going. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Thanks for the couple of you that threw some support our way. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about Strike. And again, thank you to our patrons for supporting me. You all are amazing and awesome, and it's why we can do what we can do. Peter, that's a great idea. Figure out if there's something in fact, maybe even the fourth mechanic will be floating. And then when we play a couple sessions, we'll realize, we need a resource to track this. And that might, because it keeps coming up and we don't have a good thing to Jenga to play with, and we could use it. So that's totally reasonable. The advantage of playing with your friends in your basement rather than, doing a stream for thousands of people, we sometimes do on this channel. So, all right, everybody, thanks so much. And we'll see you tomorrow on Knights of Last Call. Bye.